In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the Paranormal Hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for Ghost to Ghost. And tonight, we have a special treat for you. We have two wonderful guests that I'm privileged to call friends. And they're local authors in the paranormal world, so we're going to be talking with them tonight. So tonight we have Nicole and Nicole Kobrowski, and they've written some wonderful books, some of which we're going to be talking about this evening. My co-hosts this evening are Heather Lawson, case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
Sia Medley, and she is our investigator in training, and she's new to our podcast tonight.
Hello.
And, of course, tonight we have Nicole and Michael.
Hello. Hello.
Well, guys, welcome to the show. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I know it's been a bit of an inconvenience working out times. I try to get everybody scheduled as quick as I can, and we've been looking very forward to this. So I thought we'd start out tonight with you talking a little bit about investigations and maybe your investigation methodology and some of the places you've investigated here around the Indiana area.
So that's a really great place to start. Michael and I have been investigating for I've been investigating since I was 13. I'm 57, so do the math on that one.
Wow. You're younger than I am.
I'm 57.
I tell you, that time goes by quick, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But you know, things have changed over the years. We use a lot of different methodology for it. Mm-hmm. One thing that has changed over the years is we used to go to like a lot of public investigations and things like that if we weren't doing something on our own.
Sure.
And the last public investigation that we went on, we decided we were never doing another public investigation again. It was at Mansfield Reformatory before they put the windows in.
Oh yeah.
We'd been in Columbus, Ohio, and it was 52. And by the time we got up to Mansfield, it was snowing and freezing. And so, of course, then it was cold. It was, inopportune. And at the time, they only had a warming room to be in that was 40 degrees. And then there was one room that had a lot of heat that everybody was kind of congregating in, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, nobody, you'll never run into anybody in here, And it's a wonderful place. It's where part of Shawshank Redemption was filmed, and it just has a really fabulous history. But they had booked 150 people. And 134 showed up, and every time we tried to do some sort of EVP work,
contamination inside now.
And I'm just like, really? And I'm cleaning it up because I don't know how salty I can get on here.
You can get fairly salty. Yeah, so, I mean, so far they haven't tried to ban us, not this week anyway. So
Well, I can get very salty, but anyway, so we do a lot of private investigations, whether it's something that we're running as a fundraiser or whether it's someplace that we're going. We just like to rent out the place and then, sell the tickets for what we buy them for. We don't try to jack up the prices and make money on that. And so, some of the things that Michael and I do, Michael is probably the more skeptical of people. He believes, but he's also an IT guy, and, he tries to, think about the logical, and so do I. But
sure.
I've had too many things to happen not to think that things aren't real. And so my favorite things to do, and I want everything to be paranormal. So anytime I see something, feel something, whatever, I try to figure out what was going on. But I like to do automatic writing.
Okay.
I haven't been very successful with it, but there have been a couple of close calls with it, and I also like to do a lot of photography, and then I like to use dowsing rods.
Sure.
And it's not that I think that dowsing rods are the end all be all of anything, because we all know that they can find water and graves.
Sure.
But if you can
and certain
use
minerals
them in conjunction,
and certain minerals.
That's true too. But if we can use those and get some answers and use some other things like photography, or we use a lot of deer cams instead of like video.
Yeah, to back up the other. It's this combination. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get the, in real research, you hear triangulation. If you can triangulate the information and relate it to each other,
yes,
then you have a better chance of actually, being able to say, yes, this was paranormal. It's not to say that, dowsing rods on their own, or, the flashing cat balls, which we've had some really good stuff go on with those
sure.
lately, which I was.
And those have gotten greatly popular. And the great thing is, I found out why they're $4 for 3 of them, because drop one time, it no longer works.
Well, yeah, there was one of them that kept going off for me, and I think it was actually broken, so I took it out of rotation this past weekend. So I was like, I don't think that it's that good. And other people were putting theirs out there. They weren't getting anything, which doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, no, it goes through a lot of beating in my bag. So
I had to laugh, because the first time we got one, my old tech manager tossed it across the floor, and I looked at him and I go, that's not a golf ball. And it broke. He goes, well, it's a cat ball. I would think they'd be fairly sturdy because the cat's going to bat it around. I said, dude, you're fooling yourself. They really don't make these for cats. They made them for ghost hunters, and they're not that durable. Don't do that. So we end up buying like a dozen. And anytime one of them goes bad, we cut it apart and get the battery out and strip it in case we need it for one of the other ones. But I mean, yeah, they are not that great, but they can give you a lot of, they can give you some false positives, but I mean, they give you a lot of good stuff too. They really do.
Yeah. So Chewy's actually sells them for cats.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So if you're buying them, this is a PSA for everybody. If you're buying them at some place that says that these were developed especially for, go buy them at Chewy's, man. Just buy them at Chewy's. It's the same friggin' thing.
Well, good. That'll work.
So,
that will work.
We do the thermal camera thing too. We have the different attachments for the smartphones that we use for that. We kind of like that because it's on there. We do a lot of audio recording. Yeah, we're not
triangulating. We don't really get into like a lot of the REM pods and everything. I kind of want to get one.
Yes.
But I've been once bitten and twice shy, because I think it was the Ghost Adventurers that had this. I forget what it was called, but there was one guy that built it, and it was like in a steampunk sort of box. And the way that there were only 2 things that he explained it on, and one was an article, and there was a schematic, and then there was another thing that he was even more vague on. And I work in my day job with engineers, and so
I'm so sorry.
One of them was
I'm so sorry.
I remember this conversation. No, he's an electrical engineer, and I was like, hey, guy, I need your help on this. So we took a lunch hour. I bought him lunch, and I said, hey, I need to know what you can see in this schematic, because I can't read schematics, right? And I was like, the way that this is supposed to work is, it goes in, and it goes around this coil, and then there's a rare earth magnet in there, and then there's a pickup in there that's especially designed for the paranormal, and then it goes out the other end. And he's looking at it, and he's like, he goes, this is a radio. And I was like, what? And he was like, I was just like, I don't know what this is. I don't know that it's real. He's a skeptic anyway, but he goes, no, this is a radio. A radio works exactly like this. He goes, I can't speak to the rare earth magnet or this pickup that's especially designed for, paranormal stuff, but it's supposed to amplify. I mean, it pickup amplifies, and he was like, I'm a guitar player. I have a pickup to amplify my guitar, right?
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, okay, well, okay, that's cool, because I didn't have a lot of faith in this thing anyway. And then I took it to a chemistry teacher, not because there was any chemicals involved, but she knows a lot of scientific people.
Sure.
So she actually gets an astrophysicist that she knows on the phone, who just happens to be my son's commander in the National Guard at the time. And I did not know this at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, this is a crock of shit. He goes, this is a big crock of shit. This is a radio. That's all this is. And so I'm just like, And so they were trying to manufacture these and get them out to people. And it's like, this is why we're not early adopters of stuff.
Sure.
And then there's a guy that I follow. I'd have to go find him again, but he takes these things apart and he says, okay, this is how this works, or this is how this does not work.
Yeah, he's got a YouTube channel. I've seen him.
So I'm just like, this makes it so much easier. So, some people are like, well, why don't you use some of these more trendy things? And it's like, I get a lot of hits off of, I get a lot with just my phone camera.
Sure.
And I have a small point and shoot versus the Nikons that we used to use.
Yeah.
These pictures come out just fine. It's not like it used to be in the old days where you had your Nikon and when you would get, orbs, dust orbs in there that they'd show up.
Yes.
I have actually smacked carpet and used my cell phone and I get no orbs.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big orb person anyway, but if I see one in there, I give it a little bit more credence these days than back in the day.
Well, no, I'll share a story real quick with you on orbs before we move on. My co-founder who retired, he would not, his theory was orbs, when in doubt, we throw anything out. And that's a good way to look at things when you're doing evidence data review. But he couldn't stand orbs, and he would not discuss orbs. So, I always felt that they were balls of energy. Now, that doesn't mean they're a ghost. Doesn't mean they're not a ghost. It means we don't know what the hell they are, and they float through the air, and we're just not sure. But we find that it coincides with activity. Sometimes that, when orbs appear, it's either prior to or post, activity. But he was so adverse to orbs for Christmas one year. I bought him an orb in a bottle. I thought it was hilarious. And all it is a cotton ball in the bottom of the bottle, and I bought it for him, and he was so damn angry about it. And I thought it was cute. I mean, I bought me one. It's on my bookshelf. I thought it was really kind of cool. My wife goes,
made that for you.
Yeah, that's right. I'll tell you back. She made the one for me. And oh my God, I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, there's, and certainly orbs 10 years ago were different. Now, I'm going to take you back to one before the Nikons. Back in the early days when we were still using the Sears recorders and all that, tape recorders, we used to believe that only Polaroid film would pick up images. So you carried around these one shots, and I had one of the fancy ones that had a flip-up sensor with the flash, and those cartridges were not cheap. They had 12 photos in them. So you chose wisely, Do I run through 12 and possibly get a ghost on one, or do I wait for the moment I think I can really get something? And then you had them laying all around your site, drawing and trying to develop. And I could remember those days very well. There was something about Polaroid cameras that were designed, in the developing stage that tend to pick up more paranormal. And of course, nobody knows about that now. That's all long gone. And I remember the days of Canon and the Nikon cameras, and so many things have changed. Our still shot camera is an inexpensive Kodak camera that we run a lot of stills with, and we actually put it on auto wind where we can do 50, 60 photos a shot, and we found that that's the best way we occasionally catch something in it. But that's so many things have changed over the years, and one thing that you're bringing out that I agree with is that, bare roots or grassroots investigating has a lot to be said for it. There's a lot of neat devices, and the guy you're talking about that builds a lot of these specialized devices, it goes back to like Frank's box, the first G2 Ghost Spirit box. And he made it out of a Radio Shack realistic radio. I've got a picture of the original device, and Frank made this box, and it was known as Frank's box long before it was Ghost Radio or Ghost Box or a G2. And, of course, they've incredibly worked more on them now. But I asked a guy one time, I said, what makes them more geared toward the paranormal or parapsychology? He goes, it's all about the decals. And it reminded me when you talk about the radio, if you put the right decals on it, it's specially designed for paranormal use. He says, otherwise, it's just an electrician's tool. And he was an electrical engineer. He's brother in a lodge. And, I had to sit there and think, somehow that all seems about right. It's all about the decals. And
the first
EMF?
First EMF detector that we bought was actually from Germany. It was not made for ghost hunting at all, and it was pretty neat. Unfortunately, it had an antenna on the outside that broke off eventually. But yeah, we always like to try to find things that aren't made for ghost hunting and
So,
such.
and I'm not saying that things that are built are not good. So like if I always tell people, because they're like, oh great, this is all pseudoscience, and none of this stuff was made. How do you know that a photography, like the Polaroids or whatever, were made to pick up ghosts? How do you know that it can?
Sure.
Well, think about the woman, and I wish I could remember her name right now, but I can't, that had all the telescopes that were definitely not meant to find wormholes, yet she was able to prove the existence of wormholes with all of these telescopes.
Yeah.
Those telescopes were meant for other purposes, so why can't we take other things that were meant for other purposes and purpose them and see what we get?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying everything that's ever created that is, like I mentioned, REM pods and that kind of stuff, or the guy that, maybe he'll create something that actually, does. Again, it goes back to the TV shows, and people would not have ratings that if they did not have things happen on them.
Well, exactly. I mean, it wouldn't be a TV show. I mean, they're not, and I understand that. And, it always goes back to, we were talking before we went on live about how, one particular program is scripted. And, when I was talking to the gentleman, I mean, that was one of the first things he said. And I think some equipment, the cat balls, that's a good example. They work. I mean, we've been getting stuff off of them, but it's something we never thought about. We carry a focus object box around amongst all of our gear, and we have some of the new toys. Now, one thing about our methodology, we use a debunking, and we don't use anything we can't calibrate, with the exception, we do have a SP2 spirit box that we use as part of the SD's experiment. Because it's a double-blind study, we don't see that it requires calibration. So that's the only thing we use the box for. We don't lay it out and try to communicate, and we don't use dowsing or any of that. And that's not a problem. I'm not condemning any of that. Everybody has their own methodology. It's what works for you. But, over the years, I have found the millimeter. You were talking, Michael was talking about an antenna breaking off. I've got a millimeter, and one of the best. I asked Sean, who was one of the guys at Ghost Stop, when we were up at the last Paracon, I said, "What's the best selling item you got?" He says, "The replacement antenna for millimeters." And I've been there. What I do is, when I put the millimeter away, I have this bag, and the bag we use is from LA Police Gear, and it's a great bag. It's actually a range bag, but it has tons of pockets, and it can hold my K2s, my Mel, everything in there, and me and my wife share the bag. And so I don't know how many times I thought I dropped it in the pocket, and it didn't go in the pocket. And then I get home, and I'm taking the batteries out and checking everything. It's like, where the hell is that? But they're only $3.87, and I found it's always good to buy them in quantity. I get about 6 of them, leave them on hand for the future times I miss the pocket. And but it's kind of funny how those work. The first meter I got, first EMF detector, was for electrical.
Yep.
And,
absolutely.
I'll never forget it. My buddy was an electrician and electrical engineer, and I asked him, I said, how does this work? So he goes over to the panel in the house, and he starts describing it. I said, well, how do I find spirits with it? He goes, what? I said, ghosts. He looks at me, he goes, what are you, an idiot? I'll never forget that. He goes, it's an electrical meter, dumbass. And I'll never forget it. And he hands it to me and walks off. And later on, he actually ended up joining the team for a short period of time. But we always laughed about that, about the meter.
Dummy.
Yeah, but it's incredible how much equipment we've adapted. And how did we prove the Polaroid was better for taking pictures of ghosts? Well, really, no one knew. Someone somewhere decided that was an idea, put it out there, and everybody goes, oh, yeah, we'll go with that. But, we have one electrical engineer in our website. We call him Son of Sid. We keep his identity hid at his request. And he does make things for us. And we've got it's really cool. And we get these at the dollar store. Everybody goes, where do you shop at? We shop at the dollar store, because
wherever's the cheapest.
Yeah, because in this business we're not charging and making any money, and so we buy these at Halloween time. These little cardboard books and caskets and things that they have decorated. Then he goes in, puts an EMF detector in it for proximity. One side may have a proximity switch, the other side may have EMF, and then what he does is he puts a music box in, so it plays music when someone's under 5 foot from the device. And Oh my God, that's been one of the best things ever. And we're always calling him going, look, Ghost Stop or the Ghost Hunter store has this. Can you make that? Can we get one? Can you reverse engineer it? And we find that, some of the stuff can be done. And another podcaster friend of mine, Chris and Kelly from Traveler's Moon, he, when he goes around a lot of the Paracons and Paraunis, he sells the same devices. They're not hard to make. The plans are online for him. But, we've come so far from where we originally were. You go back, because I'm like you, Nicole. I started very early in this, and before college, I was in it in high school. I was reading, every Hans Hosler book I could, Sybil Leek book I could find. I was very much into it, very much involved into it, and we've come a long way, baby, in the equipment. That's one thing I will say. Unfortunately, it also costs more. So.
Well, I agree with that. One thing that we've had fun with, I haven't used it in a while because I've packed kind of light on a couple of our last investigations.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost been kind of a teaching thing for us. We don't normally do that. I just want to make that clear on our investigations. But
Sure.
We've had some new people that have wanted to come, and it's like, hey, come, and we'll have you in our group, and we'll kind of teach you the ropes of it, sort of thing. We've used a Faraday cage.
Yeah,
which is kind of fun. Because it's supposed to block all of the EMF.
Yeah. Did you use the bag, or you actually use a hard case?
We actually use one that is cage. We got it from Flynn Scientific.
Oh, okay.
And so we put, like, if we want to, we'll put like an EMF detector in, or not. An EMF detector.
Yes.
We'll put a digital voice recorder in there.
Sure.
And we have gotten a few things in there. So it's kind of interesting, because it's like, well, if you're supposed to block that, something's coming through anyway. So
exactly. We do the same thing with the voice recorders. We use a bag, and that's the whole idea. You're blocking out all the false signals.
So yeah, it's been really good. So I'm excited to see what comes up in the future.
Now, there's one other thing that we like to do that's very important to us, especially with our other things that we do with the books, of course, is the research. We do love doing the research for a location, finding out what was there, who was there, what was happening at what time.
Yes.
To kind of connect with the spirits that might be hanging out there.
Oh, that's, I tell you what, that's the key to it, is finding something that works and works for you.
We're lucky enough to have a couple of places that we do investigations at as fundraisers for the folks. We do not set anything up. What you get is what you get.
Sure.
But I like to make that very clear too. It's not a haunted house. It's like whatever you get is what you get. And it's like we build a relationship with the ghosts that are there. And it's not like it's static ghosts. There are ghosts that stay there, and then there are others that come in and out.
Sure.
And so we build up a relationship, or in the case of one with me, there's one ghost in one of the locations that we do fundraisers at. He does not like me.
No.
Yeah, it's fun.
No, we got a place like that. But we use it for
What?
training. We got a place like that, but we use it for training and new gear. Anytime we need to test gear out before we take it out on a live client, I can't tell you where it's at online, or on air. But we go there and we have the same thing. And, we got ghosts. I never will forget the first time we got, it was actually, I think, a tripwire. And we laid it out. And me and my tech manager is trying to figure out why it kept lighting. And we're going through this book and we're going through the YouTube video. And we can't figure out why it's doing that. And at one point we realized it's the ghosts. They're screwing with us. They figured out it's fun to watch these guys go through the manual and try to figure out what they're doing wrong. So, when they think they got it, we'll hit another light. And, that's exactly what was going on. And, so we use this place to test equipment. Sierra has not been out on an investigation with us yet. And we'll take her there and get her used to our equipment. So, nobody wants to roll up on a client's location and everybody's going, hey, you got a manual for this? I mean,
what does this do?
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So, we try to work that out. And there's ghosts that stay there. I think there's a couple transient ghosts, but it's funny because they seem to know when we come in. It's like, oh, good, they brought new toys, and it does help test it. I mean, truthfully. So, well, now let me ask you guys this: do you guys have a team, or are you just husband and wife duo?
So we made a very deliberate decision early on when we started giving ghost tours that we are not a group. We do not have a team like you do.
Okay.
We are a husband and wife. We do investigate with like-minded people. So whether they're with another group or whether they're just people who we're friends with, that, we like low drama.
Sure.
We have a
Don't
lot
we
of
all?
people. Some people use, some of the people we go around with, they use REM pods, or they will use, we use ghost box apps, or they'll use spirit boxes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want to use is perfectly fine. But we all have ground rules and things like that. We have friends that we go around with and that are empaths that. In different ways, that feel things, and they're freaking accurate. I'm an empath too, in a much different way than they are.
Sure.
And so I can go in a place and I can read a room and say, oh yeah, somebody's having a bad day, or something's really jacked up in here, or yeah, somebody doesn't really want us here, but we're going to be here for a little while, so let's talk with them like a regular human being, sort of thing. So, but we made the decision not to do that, because it was hard enough to start our business.
Sure.
With the two of us, and we did not want that extra layer of stuff in there. But we get questions a lot of times about where can I find a group or what have you. We used to try to keep up with a lot of the groups, but then they started splintering off, or they'd go away.
Sure.
And so it's not that we're against any groups or anything. We just tell people, hey, go online and see what you can find, but here are some guidelines. When we talk about people in groups, we say, first of all, go find a group that actually fits with you and the way that you want to investigate.
Sure.
We've heard a lot of horror stories of groups that are like, and I don't want to pick on family-based, but I'm going to use that as the example. All right.
Oh yeah, I know one group. It's family-based. I get you.
And they don't, they will bring other people in, but then they don't get to go to all the investigations without any reason why, or they will contribute dues, but they never get to play with the equipment. And then, what happens if that group disappears? Where does all that kitty go? Where does the money go? Where does the equipment go? Does it get divvied up? If they're a not-for-profit, they're supposed to sell it, if they disband. So we just, know what you're getting into before you get into it. So I was like, I can't tell you which groups are good or which ones are bad. I've lost track at this point. I can't. So I just say, be careful of what you're getting into. And then I also tell them, it's like, look, you can find like-minded people without actually being part of a group if you would rather do that. Because there are some people that are like, well, I really want to go around, but I don't know if I want to be part of a group. So
I tell you, you gave me a great idea. I'd love to get you back on when we talk about
that question.
Yeah, talk about groups, because we're probably the oldest group out there. We always find it amusing. And I know there's two other groups in particular that have been around for a while, probably not as long as we have, in my opinion. But the other day I put up on our website that we were formed, and the concept was formed in 99, but we came active in 2000. So we've been around 25 plus years. About the next week, one certain group published that they've been around since 2000. They changed it on their website. I thought, oh, good, it's keeping up with the Joneses. This ought to be fun. Within the following week, the third website had said they've been around since 1999. It reminded me of the Little Rascals with the baseball bat and going hand over hand.
Why do people have to do this? I don't understand this. It's tit for tat competition, get your 15 minutes of fame thing.
Yeah,
I really don't.
I've never understood it. People ask me because they have a, and I got to be careful. I don't want to piss a lot of people off because I like a lot of people. And I've got people, one team in particular that retired. And our tech manager came from that team. And the lady that does all of our embroidery, she's not on the team, but she's one of our contractual people that do the embroidery. They all came from a team. And the team, I knew these people, knew them very well, still do. They're nice people. They decided one day, hey, we're going to retire. And they were in the fire service. And they were going to retire and go to Florida. The problem was they didn't tell the rest of the group. They retired, took everything with them.
Wow.
Gone, and I called him one day and I go, where you guys at? Well, we're in Clearwater. And I go, Florida? And they go, yeah. And I go, vacation? They go, no, we moved down here. I go, well, yeah, what happened to the group? And we're retiring. And, then about a week later, their guy called me and said, I'm looking for a spot. My group disappeared. And, I tell everybody, because, our equipment is donated. Everybody, pitches in, but the equipment stays as part of the group. Everybody always asks me, they say, what happens if the group folds? If I die, I've got people already in place to take the group and continue on. I hope that we forward the science further. I can't guarantee anything, but we have a large, I hate to say bylaws. In the Shrine and the Masonic Lodge, we use bylaws and constitutions. I didn't like that phrase.
Great.
Well, yeah, it does serve a purpose. So we have what we call a handbook, and it has all kinds of rules. I always tell everybody it's a Jeff Foxworthy rule. If it's in the book, it means that sometime it happened and we had to make a rule about it. And that's kind of over the last 25 years how we did. But I know groups, just like you're talking about. One in particular who was down in the south part of Indy. For years, I knew him, and he called me one day and says, I made a career change. I said, really? He says, yes, I bought a pizza parlor. We're not going to be hunting ghosts any longer. We're going to do pizzas. Okay. I'll try to throw you some business if I can, lad. And he goes, do you want to buy any of our gear? And I said, well, where did the gear come from? Was it donated by your members, or what happened? Well, no, it's okay. I've got right to sell it. And I wouldn't buy it because I didn't know, where this was leading. But groups do come and groups go, and some of them are formed in a garage. We do our podcast and we meet in a room in our house called the Crypt. We had a contest naming it. Yeah, and I'm trying to find a crypt keeper. I found one, but they wanted $500. It's not that much of a novelty that I'm going to pay $500 for a crypt keeper. But anyway.
Why not?
Yeah, I looked at that.
Have you tried to find it at Greenwood Happy Homes?
Greenwood Happy Homes? I have not heard of that.
That's where
Greenwood
Tim got
Happy
his
Hunt.
table.
Oh, yeah. Okay, they got all the stuff on eBay and Marketplace.
Yes.
Yeah, Tim bought a table, my tech manager, and he showed it to me. He got it from there. No, I have not tried that. I may have to call him. Inherently, I'm cheap. And,
No.
Yeah. I hate to put a lot, but I thought it'd be really cool if we had it doesn't even have to be animatronic work, some sort of crypt keeper. I used to love the show when I was younger.
They make some of those things themselves.
Yeah, and I think maybe we could do that.
I can't speak for like pricing or anything like that. But they're also open to having people do podcasts and stuff from their location.
Ooh, that might be an idea for a future remote.
Making connections.
Yeah, well, that's what I like to think about, and we'll definitely reach out to them because Tim was very happy with his table, and I asked him, I said, your wife know you bought this? He said, no. Yeah.
Well, I bet she does.
Yeah,
now.
I bet she
it's in the house
now. And I had to laugh about it, but yeah, we have all kinds of things. I have a large collection of books that we reference also for as far as research and all that. But no, we always laugh because we meet at the Crypt, and that's just a given, and that's where we do continuing education. Everything is done here. So, but well, I'll tell you what. And as we're talking here, there's been so many things that pop through my head to talk about. And one of the things that I had to bring out is we have what we call free night. And this is usually held at a location, sometimes a training location, but anybody that wants to try any kind of new equipment piece that they may have or wish to purchase that doesn't go
or
along.
something that we don't use.
Something we don't use. That's the night we do it. And it's just kind of an open night. And I'll never forget, we were at a gentleman's house, and this is going to sound horrible anyway. His dad passed away, so he calls me up and goes, my dad's dead. Do you want to use the location? I'm going, yeah. What do you say? And so anyway, he gets...
What do you got?
Yeah, what do you got? And I said only a person in paranormal research would have that idea. That's the same guy that shows up at the showing of your best friend. You're carrying a millimeter around in your pocket, and
Cough,
so
cough, wink, wink.
yeah, like I haven't done that before. But anyway, it was just kind of funny, and he got the ghost app on the phone, the ghost radar, and I'll never forget it. And and he's running around the house like some guy, like some 16-year-old with a telephone on TikTok. And he's running around following these dots. And he runs right up to me and he looks at me and I go, really? really? I said, do I look like I'm that dead? I said, you answer that, I'll just slap the shit out of you. He looked at me and he says, sorry, man. He turns around, walks by. But, we've had a lot of equipment that doesn't work. We've had some neat experiences. First time we ever used a spirit box for Estes method, we got, which we think was his dad, screaming no on the box about 3 times. We've had some very interesting stuff, but that's a night where if anybody has any questions, just because we don't use it, it's good to have knowledge of how it works and what it does. And I think the instrument you were talking about earlier was called the puck, and it was a remote device, and I don't think they're made anymore. But yeah, there was a device called a puck for a while. We never owned one, but I know they were out there. And I'm not going to sit here. I know Sean from Ghost Stop. He's very nice. I don't have a TV show, so I don't get any free equipment to test. I always point that out. But, unlike I like, because of the tracer that just came out, most everything is $200. We recently bought the Dead Bell at the last Paracon last year, and everything is exactly $199. Reminds me, if you remember the old Earl Scheib commercials that had the body shop, y'all paint any car for $99.95. About anything out of these guys it's $199.95. And if you're a show, it's $150. Pardon?
It's a thing to do with pricing.
Exactly. It's a marketing thing, and I get a kick out of it. And so, we're always looking at that stuff. But, yeah, I wanted to bring that out because, we do that. Now, you were talking about public investigations. Best story ever that I got from that. And I always tell my people, you're not allowed to freelance. Okay, now, that's a tongue-in-cheek statement to a certain degree. That doesn't mean when me and my wife go on vacation, she'll tell you, she says, I want to go to Myrtle Beach. In an hour and a half, I will know at least 15 allegedly haunted locations there I'd like to look at. I don't go for the beach. I don't go for the jet skis. I want to see what's there. And one of the best ones I ever gotten there was a gentleman who did a public tour, and he had this great shirt on. On the front of it, it had the name of the tour company. On the back says, if you see me running, try to keep up. It's not part of the tour. And I looked at the guy and said, look, dude, I got $30. I'll give you $30. I'll give you the shirt I'm wearing. It's worth about $40. It's a Tommy Bahama. I'll give it to you. You give me that T-shirt. And the guy says, no, I can't. They'll fire me. I got 2 of them. And I'll never forget it. So when I came back, my chief of staff, his daughter, made me a laser etch glass that says, if you see me running, try to keep up. It's not part of the investigation. And I have it now over at the bar. But one of the greatest stories was he went to Waverly Hills. Okay, I'm not picking on the folks down there. They have a wonderful site. But it's just become more and more commercialized, like a lot of sites. And we as a team will pick so many sites that we pay for. And one big thing we always do every year is go to a Paracon. For years it was Michigan up at Sault Ste. Marie, and that's no longer going on per se like the way it did. We liked it because you had lectures and continuing education classes and gave us a chance to expand. And but we also take in a few locations that are commercial we pay for. And so he went down and paid for one. And they have basically open for investigation. They have 3 floors and they have 2 wings. So you have 6 different locations. They stuck him into this crowd. He's the only person there trained or with a team or anything else. Everybody else has watched a lot of TV, and I'm not going to say the show, but dear God, it all made sense. And this one lady is carrying a Kroger bag with all of her gear in it. So the whole time, every time they move on his recording, it's from this plastic bag.
Oh my God.
And at one point, you hear him say, dear God, lady, I'll buy you a real bag. Put that down and take this shit out of it. Because he's listening real time with headsets. And he told me, he says, you can't get him to shut up. It's like taking a class of first graders to the zoo. He says they won't shut up. They talk to each other. He says you can't have an investigation. He says you're not allowed to get very far from them. And he says if they make a noise, you can't tell whether it was them or actual evidence. And he gave me tape to go over. And dear mother of God, you could not. That sack was horrible. And, I said, how far away were you from the lady with the bag? He says, it didn't matter. He says, she was like an ex-wife. She wouldn't go away. And he said she was always within 4 feet of me. And you know, the recording was horrible. So we don't like to, I always tell people, you know, unlike other groups, because we've had some other groups say, well, come on out and we'll help you. No. You don't belong on our investigation unless you've been trained, because, you know, we have a very distinct way of taking EVPs. We have a very distinct way of gathering data. So we ensure we can knock out as much contamination as possible. We've been doing it for a while. And people always say, I'd love to go on that. I don't want to join the group. I thought, well, okay. You know, I can give you several locations where you pay to go, but we won't be going with us because, I have a certain criteria that I expect everyone to meet. And that's the problem you get into. Now, we're going to be doing the Randolph County Infirmary here in the fall. We decided because our Paracon went away that we loved so much, we were going to do that instead. And we're actually spending the night there, and we try to plan some fun things. We have to eat some meals. And so me and the wife being vets, we thought, well, we'll bring MREs in for everybody and let them experience how you eat an MRE. You know, it'll be a new experience that I'm sure they'll never forget the rest of their life. Yeah, so we're going to buy a case of them.
I don't ever want another MRE.
Well, I tell you, it depends on the one you get. You know, when you're hungry enough, it all tastes good, and that's what we told everybody.
No, my son used to say to stay away from the ones that had like strawberry something or other in them. It wasn't good. He was like, nope.
I know the chili.
I don't know what it was.
The chili mac is 50-50. Either people like it or they absolutely hate it. And, you know, I remember a buddy of mine told me, he said, the cheese doesn't taste like cheese. I said, you eat cheese whiz? He says, yeah. I said, same difference, dude. You know, it's processed.
It's basically the same thing that's in cheese in a can.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's the same kind of thing. I mean, now, the one you liked was beef stroganoff or
no, it was,
beef
spaghetti.
Yeah,
sauce,
spaghetti.
They don't make that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I'm old enough to go back to Sea Rats.
That's how old I am.
When they came in cans, yeah. So, you know, but yeah, there's always a few of them you want to stay away from. Matter of fact, there's a guy who has a YouTube channel, a vet that does the 5 worst MREs, and he does them every year after the new ones come out. I always find it amusing. But the big thing is when they come in and they start passing them out, then you get the trade. Everybody wants to, you know, especially the poor guy who got the meal that no one wants, and he's trying to, you know, you throw something extra in with it to trade somebody else to get something he likes. But I thought that would be a neat thing for everybody to get to at least eat one meal by MREs and learn how the water-activated warmers work and so forth. But, you know, we do go on a few of the commercial ones, but we usually have enough of a caseload. And I always explain to everybody with us, we might get 5 cases a month, but one of them may be the only one we end up investigating because a lot of those, they're in situations where we can't investigate or it's in a situation where the contamination's so bad, you know, it wouldn't benefit any data we would receive. So we try to help work with them as best we can. So now, let me ask you guys this, Michael, and you too, sir. If do you guys do cleansings or you just do investigations?
So before I answer that, I want to talk about like the investigations that we do because
sure.
You know, you talk about you don't belong in our investigations and all that kind of stuff because
yes.
you guys do things a certain way.
Sure.
That's kind of the good thing about the public investigations is that, and I don't mean to be a control freak, but
no.
We work with the organizations and we control the space, and we have absolutely no problem saying get the hell out.
Yeah.
If you're going to be disrespectful to this place, whether it's, you know, we have rules like, you know, open flame, you know, don't be conjuring up anything weird, right? And if you don't respect these places because they're old and they're not ours, and even if they were, you know, we'll kick you out. But we use stop and go signs in the areas that they're allowed to go in, and we tell them to use their indoor voices.
Yes.
Otherwise, I will yell at you in a nice way, in a hiss, more like a, you know, a whisper hiss to shut up, because we want everybody to have a good time in these buildings. Now, the Athenaeum Foundation building is big, and it's not so bad there. But like when we do, like the Hamilton County Historical Society in the old jail,
yes,
you can hear everything in that house. So
echoes.
You know, you have to be a little bit quiet. So we use the stop and go signs, and that helps keep the contamination down.
That's a good way. I've never thought about that. That's actually a very, very ingenious way of doing it. Yeah.
We started doing it after Mansfield.
Yeah, after Mansfield, we're like, if we ever do anything like this is what we're doing. And it's worked out really well. And then you know that if it says go, you can go into that area.
Yes.
And stop means, and everybody's usually good about not hogging the space.
Sure.
But to your idea of cleansing, so we don't go into like the places that we do investigations for, like fundraisers and go cleanse their places.
Well, sure. No.
Michael
Yeah.
and I have
They wouldn't appreciate
cleansed.
that. There goes their money. Yeah.
Well, we have gone to people's houses, and there is one business, and I don't know if I want to name it or not. I don't think she'd be upset about it, but I'm not going to name it at this particular moment.
I don't blame you.
But she asked us to come in because they're remodeling the building, and she had everybody's culture is different, and so there were Venezuelan workers that were working in there, and they kept saying that they would see this woman standing in the basement with them.
Yes.
And the location, I guess I can say it because I'm going to say who these people are anyway.
Yes.
It's the Lacey Arts Building in Noblesville.
Okay.
And they're still remodeling it. It's freaking awesome. There is a ghost named Alice that's in there, but there's also a ghost named Helen that I'll tell you about in a minute.
Okay.
But they were very concerned because there was this ghost there. So we went in with the business owner, Katie. She's awesome. And I said, I'll come in and, we'll help cleanse the house or the building. It's 3 stories plus the basement. It's like
wow.
Ghost Central. It's great. But, so you have to go to every corner and you have to go up to every, point in the ceiling and whatever words that you want to affirm to say. And basically it's, all negativity must go, all positivity can stay. And then we were speaking with the spirit saying, hey, if you're going to play nice, you can stay here. And if you're not, then you got to go. So
don't scare the workers.
Yeah, don't scare the workers anymore. They're doing good things and all that stuff. And so we went and we did a quadruple thing. So we used sage, sweetgrass, Palo Santo, and cedar.
Yeah, okay.
And
yes, very good.
She was helping with me because I said, this is your building. You need to be a part of it. And she did.
Yes, you
went
do.
all around. It took 3 hours to cleanse that building.
Oh, wow.
It did. And then we did an investigation there that night. And we found Helen in the basement. We were sitting there. It was 3 of us. And 4 of us. Scott was there, right? And so we were sitting down in the basement of the building, kind of where the guys were seeing things. And we had left bundles of all 4 of those things out in different areas to kind of help soothe everybody, right?
Sure.
And it did calm down. It did calm the building down. It did. But we were all down there, and we got one of our friends who used to do investigations, and he used to give our ghost tours, Ken, Seattle Ken. We got him on the phone, and he's like, oh, there's a woman here that doesn't like those workers. And I just want it known before I say this. This is what the ghost said. This is not me. All right. She doesn't like them because they're, quote, dirty looking. And so I said, well, I was like, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one.
Yes.
And all of us heard, and we did not have an EVP going at this time. We all heard her go, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but when she like clucked her little tongue on the roof of her mouth. And I was like, wow, really? So, but she told us her name was Helen. We were using dowsing rods for that. We think we know who she is. We need to do a little bit more research on her. And we need to get to go back in and do another investigation, but they've been doing so much work in there that we haven't been able to get in. That building is amazing. We got an EVP in there of a banshee.
Really?
Yes.
An Irish banshee.
Doing an investigation. We were doing an investigation, and Michael had gone all the way downstairs to the front office area. It used to be a hardware store. And then we were all upstairs in what used to be the boys' club, and before that it was a dance hall.
Sure.
The Knights of Pythias. And so we were all up there.
Okay.
And there were I think there were 6 of us in this big ballroom, and Michael was downstairs because they didn't have any air conditioning or anything like that, and it was very hot upstairs. And so he was just taking a break, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden we heard this, and we were like, what the hell just happened here? And my voice recorder went off right before this happened.
Yes.
Ken got it on his phone, and he's like, what the hell is that? And everybody's like, what is that? And then it did it again.
Wow.
And I'm messaging Michael. I was like, did you hear this downstairs? And everybody's going onto the fire escape to see if maybe it was some weird car or something like that. Couldn't figure it out. Michael didn't hear anything. A couple weeks later, one of the guys that was with us, he's the son of one of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
He and his band, maybe someday, or actually, was it Kermit Kids at the time? Anyway, the band was upstairs doing a video in there.
Yes.
And scared the crap out of a couple of the band members because they heard the banshee again.
Wow.
Same thing.
And Nicole heard it a couple more times after.
Yeah, and then, I heard it a couple times myself when Michael was in the building with me, but he didn't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, yeah,
That's outstanding.
It is. It was amazing. It's awesome.
You know, I just finished a lecture. Well, I really didn't finish it. I mean, I did the last lecture I gave was on Irish ghosts and folk legends. And, of course, we cover the banshee, the Donahill. We cover, leprechauns. We cover the Coach Devourer, and we cover all the legends. And, it's rare to hear them over here. When I've been to England twice, I'm Scottish by family, and I play bagpipes. So one of the things I love to do is go over to the tattoo. And when we're over there, the guys always cook up a ghost tour for me. And they have a lodge. It's in the Tower of London. It's called Tower Lodge. And so the guys have a lot of pull, and MJ, she's always been a little jealous. I got to tour the tower one night on my own. Well, actually, I was with a beefeater, but I got to tour it because they arranged that. And you don't hear banshees too much in this area. I mean, not in the United States. I mean, it's like elementals and a lot of things. Those you find to be more European than you do anything else. But that's fantastic. And the building sounds like that would be a really, really good investigation site. It really does. We don't do cleansings, but I always ask people. I mean, we know how. We don't always do them. And we have done, when I say we don't do them, we don't generally. We've had a couple instances where we did them to help someone out. And matter of fact, I did the primary cleansing. My tech manager, Tim, helped me. And after it was over with, he looked at me and he says, do you think we removed anything? I said, it's really not the point. I said, if the client, which was a much older, elderly lady, and I say this, I know she doesn't listen to podcasts. I said, if she thinks we removed it, then that's all that really matters. And she did.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, it was there to help the client, and it turned out I called her a week later. It was gone in her mind, and that was great. So I tell him, I don't know if it was there or not, but whatever it was, the end result we attained. And so sometimes you have to go the distance for a client. And, it always bugs me when people say, well, the last group charged me. I'm going, don't ever pay a group for this. Why would you do that? The only thing we charge for, and we do have a Paranormal University master class. It's 2 classes, and it's actually a parapsychology level class. And being a former associate professor at a university, I had taught that for one summer as a summer course, and half credit course. But anyway, so we bring people in, and it's done at a site known to be active and ends in a small investigation. And then the second class deals with data evidence review, and it's very popular. Now, we do charge for that, and the price changes depending on where we're at. If we're working with like Steve Couch or somebody at one of the locations, and they need to make money for their location and their charity, then we work on a price that behooves all of us, and and then that's what we use to charge each person. We never do more than 8 people. That way we keep the group small, and they get more one-on-one time with our investigators. I'm sorry?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Let's keep it small. I mean,
yeah.
You want everybody to have a good time. You want everybody to enjoy themselves. I mean,
sure.
Come on.
Now, I could tell you some great stories off of that. And the only reason I'm not is I want to get a chance to cover your books. But we've had some great times. And, I always tell people, they always ask me, how do you convert a skeptic? Well, you don't. The ghosts do. Until the first time they've had an experience, right. That's when they become, it's like a come to Jesus moment. At that moment, they come, and I got to tell you this now that I've got into this. We had one class, and a couple arrived. I don't know whether they were husband and wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, but they arrived. And the guy came out and told me, he says, look, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I don't believe in any of this. I think it's all bullshit. But my girlfriend, wife, whatever, really does, and she made me come here. He says, but I want you to know I'm going to be respectful. I won't interrupt any of your classes. He's a big, tall dude. He's probably a good 6'5" and 6'6". And he told me, he said, and so, yeah, he sat through the class. We got to the point of the investigation. At some point, my tech manager comes by and says, hey, that big tall guy? I said, yeah. He says, he went out here like his ass was on fire. He said, he just went out and he's sitting in the car in the parking lot. And I said, well, we're not in the best of areas to be sitting in a car at 2 a.m. So I walk out there to see what's going on, and I knock on the window like a patrol officer and go, can I have a word? He rolls the window. I said, are you okay? And he's, oh my God, he's white as a sheet. He's a little diaphoretic, and being a medic, I'm checking him out, and I go, what happened? He says, look, I owe you an apology. He says, I am so sorry for anything that I might have said about ghosts not existing. And so he explains to me, the long and short is, he's in the building, and they were talking to a child ghost, and it grabbed hold of his hand. And at that point, he chose to do a tactical evac, and he left the group, didn't give any word why he was leaving, and he made for the car. And he looked at me and he says, I said, well, this is not the best area in the world. Maybe you should wait inside. He says, no, sir. He says, I'm perfectly fine here. I'll take my chances with the gangbangers. He says, there's no way I'm going back in that building. He says, but when you're done, just send her out. And I said, okie doke. I went back. And I said, well, if
You wouldn't even come back for.
Yeah, he wouldn't come back for his certificate or anything.
That is more common than you think, though. And I don't mean to be like sexist here, but it happens to a lot of men. Because a lot of men are like, well, I don't believe in all this stuff. And it's like, well, but do you believe in this or that? Or, is something unexplained? And they're like, well, yeah. But then I was like, so is it more like if you can't see it or you can't feel it or you can't control it, that you want nothing to do with it?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They're like, well, yeah, because I don't know how to deal with that. And to your point about the gangbanger, it's like, I know what to do with a gangbanger, but I don't know what to do with this little kid ghost. How threatening was that little kid ghost?
Oh, that was like a 10-foot tall wrestler for this guy. I mean, it scared, you could tell he was born again. He believed in ghosts. And I mean, I felt bad for him. I had to laugh because, we get that from time to time. And we always say that, the only way you can convert a skeptic is by letting them have their first experience. And, that's one I love to share. That's one of my best master class, stories is from there. So, well, I'm going to break off a bit and let's talk about books. Now, I know Michael is starting to write quite a few, and you've been writing them for quite some time. That's how we originally met. And let's start off. I'm going to let you drive this subject. So, and I don't have a full list. Now, one thing that we talked about is I love to talk about Central State, and I have some stories that you may or may not know, and I want to throw out to you. But I've got, every time we meet, I usually try to pick up a book I don't have. And actually, after we spoke on the phone the other night, turns out Heather, my wife, bought the Krampus book, and I didn't know it. Yeah, so she's had it. Yeah, she said, don't you remember we did? Well, I might have been talking to you at the time and missed that whole program. But
it happens.
Yeah, so she picked up, she picked up the book, and I said, hey, you're not going to believe this. Nicole has a book on Krampus. She said, yeah, I know, we bought it. I go, when was that? And she goes, well, it's in the bedroom. It's not downstairs in the library. I thought, well, that's why I couldn't find it. And so,
because it's my book.
Yeah, and I was telling you, I was talking to Greg Lawson last Paracon, and I said, he's selling a zombie coloring book. And I go, really, cuz? And he goes, no, I'm not kidding. He says, you would be incredibly surprised how many of these I've sold. He says, I'm on the 6th case, and this is day 1. And he says, I'm going to run out before the end of the show. I go, people are buying. He says, oh, you need to get a coloring book. And I thought, okay, now that's one thing I never thought about. And he said, oh, you ought to. And he also brought up a book on living the life as a public service state or federal employee.
He said how to get a government job.
Yeah, government job. And I looked at him. I said, and this.
He sold them all.
Yeah, he sold every one of them. And I laugh because Richard Eastham, who has been on me about writing. Eastep, I'm sorry, I said Eastham tonight. I've been on some medical stuff, so I apologize. Eastep, he told me one time this story. We were talking. He's a fireman in Toronto, and he said my publisher came back one day and said, the paranormal books really aren't selling. I need you to write a Western book. And he says, I'm not a Western book writer. He says, 48 hours later, two Zane Greys and one Louis L'Amour, and buddy, I'm cranking out Westerns. So, I mean, I had to laugh when I saw all that. But yeah, I didn't realize she'd picked the book up, so I didn't know it. And I was trying to go over the material before we got on air. But where would you like to start in which book? Let's go that direction.
What about the coloring books, right?
Well, let's start with the coloring books.
Okay.
You want to talk about that?
No, you
Okay.
you're the mastermind of that.
Okay, so we started off with the Haunted Night Scares coloring book, which is just a collection of things that you can color based on either, I think there's a couple of true things in there, but most of them are based like on urban legends, like, the bride that gets shut in a box and disappears on her wedding day and all of that kind of stuff, or the hook man and all of that. So it on one side you have the actual coloring page, and then on the other side you have whatever the legend or whatever the story is, so that if you take it out, it looks a little bit different than a regular book because it looks like it's printed wrong, but I made it that way so that if you take out that picture, you have the story with it. So I've had several people do different coloring, do the art, because I'm not good at that part. I can think it, but I'm not very good at it. And so we started out with that one, and then we're like, well, we need a Lizzie Borden coloring book because, Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, I seen that, yeah.
So we put together just at a high level, because there's so many ways that you could go with Lizzie Borden, but we just put together a high level of, where she grew up and, what she did and, the murders. And I am on the team that thinks that she totally did it. And she was just really lucky that she got away with it because of the social norms of the time. But again, it's just a little bit about, the story as you go through it, ending with, the end of the trial and all of that. And then our two newest coloring books, one is the cryptid one. So different cryptids from around the world and the U.S. And
I got to ask, do you have Bosco in it?
I'm sorry?
I got to ask this, do you have the Bosco monster in it? The turtle?
I believe that we do. I would have to go back and look at it because I had a whole list and I was like, you got to cut this down because you can only afford to spend so much on the artist.
Thick.
Yeah.
And I think we might. I know we've got. I think we've got Bosco. We've got the Flatlands monster.
Yes.
We've got. We've got Mothman, Bigfoot, and then the jackalope on the front, the Wolpertinger from Germany.
Yes.
That thing is my favorite.
It's
I
so cute.
love it.
Yeah. Well, I want to order a jackalope for the crypt, and I actually pissed off a guy.
You should look for one at Oddities.
Well, yeah, that might be an idea. I mean, I wanted, because they have them on Amazon, but they look more like a stuffed animal on a plaque. And I went to this. It wasn't a paranormal event we were at. I'm not sure where we were at now. I think about it. But there was a taxidermist there. Oh, I tell you what it was. It was one of the fairs. I think it was Johnson County Fair. Oh, I pissed this guy off. I walked over, and I didn't mean to. I walked over, and I said, hey, because he has all these different animals. And I said, he looks at me, and he says, what are you looking for? And I said, I'd really like a jackalope. And the guy looked at me and goes, no taxidermist, a respectable taxidermist makes something so stupid in their whole life. He says, and he got kind of mad about it. And and I'm thinking, dude, all I was doing was ask if you had one. If you don't know, it would have been a perfectly good answer. And then he looks at me and says, is there anything else you like to have taxidermied? I said, yeah, one of my ex-wives, but I don't think it'll work. And I just walked off at that point. The guy behind me at the other booth thought I was hilarious. And this guy was still griping about it. I thought, dear God, all you had to do is say no. But yeah, I thought it would be neat to have, that and a furry trout. If you can find a furry trout, that was another big one, I
think it's Oddities and Curiosities that you can actually find a Wolpertinger there.
Oh, that'd be fine.
I really do.
That'd be fine.
And a jackalope,
Yes.
And I know in Germany, I know that there are still people that make them.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you might go online. You'd have to find it under a Wolpertinger, though. But,
okay.
Yeah.
I used to do the quests every year on a World of Warcraft to get them.
Well, I tell you, if you don't know, and Michael, I assume you're German descent, are you not, sir?
Yep.
Okay. If you ever go up to Heidelberg, okay, I know Jurgen. Jurgen's a good guy, and I hope that his health is doing well. He's fighting a lot of things right now, and I love going up there. And there's several German candies I found, because we're diabetic, so we can't have much sugar, and everything European has less sugar. But you know, they have a hand-carved Krampus mask. And when I do my lectures in Christmas on Christmas ghosts and other denizens, I have a buddy of mine. He's another bagpiper. And that should explain a lot of things. Bagpipers aren't exactly normal. So anyway. No, yeah. And he works with B-Town Krampus. And he's working on a costume. And I try to drag him along with me to come in for and people love that. But he goes to the Krampus run. And I'd love to do it. But they, you know, some of the masks that come out of Germany that are hand carved, we're talking $800-900. You know, I actually, I did a podcast on, and I got to be a honorary member of both B-Town and I'm an honorary member of Salem Krampus Society. And, you know, they have big things every year. And that's the one thing I asked Jurgen. I said, where'd you get the mask at? It's in the back room. The Krampus mask, he says, probably a garage sale. I go, great. That wasn't the answer I was fishing for. He says, well, I don't know. He says, you know, this stuff's been collected since '68. I don't know where it came from. He said, I didn't even know it was back there. And I had to laugh about it because he's so much fun. And, you know, his son-in-law took over the business. We don't get up that way very often, but occasionally we stop in and you know, it's just a load of fun. But, yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard to find some of this stuff. It's getting harder, but Krampus is kind of made a rebirth, you know. And the funny story I tell, the gentleman I just told you about had the Krampus suit. He lives in a over 55 community. Well, the community learned they hate John because when
I'm sure the feeling's mutual.
Yeah, John doesn't particularly like them either, but, you know, it's kind of like the HOA, it's rogue. And anyway, he put out a couple of Krampus flags and decided to celebrate Krampus Day, where everybody thought he was a demonic worshiper because no one knew what Krampus was. So, you know, they're trying to get the police to ban him and everything else and ban his flags so that, you know, he does the same thing I do. He buys more flags. And, you know... This was a great, you know, if you get the chance to listen to one of my Krampus, I have 2 Krampus podcasts, and, you know, this is how this all started. So, you know, I'm always on Chuckanut Distillery because they make the Krampus liqueur that you can set out. I'm always trying to get them to send me a bottle. And we advertise free for them, but I've never gotten a bottle. But anyway, they do the herbal liqueur.
Willing to sell you one.
Yeah, they're willing to sell me one, which I thought was very gracious of them. But anyway, yeah, you know, it's a German herbal liqueur, and it's done by a recipe. I'm assuming sort of like, you know, different liqueurs are done. And so, but yeah, he takes it very seriously. It's just for fun, you know, and he does Krampus night. And, you know, it worked out really well. But you're starting to see a resurgence of this. People are starting to look more into it and more into some of the folklore.
Yeah, we have our 2 Krampus coloring books, and they're also available as already colored books, picture books.
Yeah.
But one other thing we do at the expos we go to, we do sell a lot of postcards.
Oh, really?
Of creepy things, historic postcards, reprinted, vintage stuff, and the Krampus section is always very popular too. People love those old Krampus postcards.
Well, that's really neat. Now, I haven't seen a postcard in years. I really haven't. That's really cool. I mean,
they probably frame them instead of sending them.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, they used to send them. I mean, when I was a kid, you went to Florida, every good gas station had a rotisserie rack of comic books and postcards. I mean, you know.
But most people probably use
get a bunch
pictures.
of Krampus ones. This couple, they got a ton of them, and they're like, we're sending these to family this year.
Oh, that's cool.
It's Christmas cards.
Yeah, we ought to do that. I mean, I may have to get with you guys and get some because, you know, we're one of the few members that send out Christmas cards every year. Now, my wife doesn't let me send out. I had some that had, one of them had Santa from the back at a urinal and it said Tinkle Bells. Yeah, well, I'm not allowed to send those anymore. But anyway, we send out the
not to everybody anyway.
Yeah, we send out the regular ones, but you know that would be really cool. I hadn't thought about sending out Krampus cards, and that you know most of the family, I always say we're kind of the black sheep because it's like the guys in the fire service. They all think it's cool that I deal with ghosts, and they think that's just fantastic. And I do all these lectures, and they think it's great. But firemen are unique in their own way, so I don't, you know. Now it's the other people I lose credibility with. You know, it's always great. You know, we talk about because I do occasionally get asked to do lectures. I do lectures in school because I went to 9/11, so I talk to them and I talk about firefighting, and then it comes up the part about my hobby. Most people say, well, we play golf, or we do parapsychology investigation, and
you should stick to the bagpipe.
Yeah, because that one goes over a little better. The good news is most people don't know what the word parapsychology means, but once they've Googled it on the phone, it's like, holy shit, and that goes, there it goes, and I always have to laugh about it, but most certainly, yeah, that is a really, I'm really charged up about that. That is really a neat idea. So the coloring books have been a big response then. You've done really well with these.
Yeah, they've been pretty fun.
Yeah, we've got one more coming out this year. It is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow Reimagined.
Oh, that's one of my favorite stories.
I got somebody.
Yeah, he just sent me some of the pictures that he's thinking about, and I owe him some feedback so he can go forward with them. So
that's outstanding.
We have all sorts of ghost books as well. We have the longer stories, like from around Indiana, and a variety of books. Our newest one on that one is First Circle City that Michael and I wrote together. And then we also have the encyclopedias that are the shorter travel books that you go out and you take your pictures and you get your evidence and all of that. And Michael, he wrote the Encyclopedia of Haunted Ohio.
Yeah, Nicole, and I helped, but Nicole wrote the Encyclopedia of Haunted Indiana a while ago and has a second version out, and I did the Ohio version. And as she said, it's more like small stories from every county in the state that has haunted places, and we go just look at the evidence, see what people have found, what we found if we were there ourselves, how to get there. And Nicole also finished the one for Illinois and Kentucky this year.
Oh, fantastic.
We've been working on those for a while, and they finally came out this year, so it was always fun.
And then the other types of books we have two history books. One is the Central State book, and then the book She Sleeps Well, which is about our favorite ghost and her life, Dr. Helena Elise Hermine Kanabe. All the wonderful things she did when she became a doctor here and was later unfortunately murdered.
Yes.
And then I'm working on the sequel to my paranormal fiction book called, the first one was there we go, Silent Night, and the second one is All Is Calm. So I am well into that book, and hopefully we'll have it out yet this summer. So I'm super excited about that. Both of those are set in Indiana.
Yes.
And so it's really kind of fun to do a book that's set in Indiana.
Yeah.
Fiction.
Well, certainly.
And then we have we have a couple oddball books. So we have a book, it's actually a children's book. It has nothing to do with the paranormal, called Races with Dad. And it's all about this little boy who talks about things that he does with his dad from his viewpoint. And then we have Wild Innocence, which is Wild Innocence, and it's a smarmy, spicy romance novel set in Indiana at the turn of the 1900s.
Oh, outstanding! So you're going to do a little different genre there, yeah. Well, between the Navy and the fire department, if I wrote a romantic novel, it would be banned somewhere in the state. So, yeah, I don't think that'll be an area I can go into, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
I know people tell me about that book. That book and the Silent Night book, because there's a lot of graphic sex in that one.
Yes.
That there's a lady, she's like, I can't look at you the same way anymore. And I was like, well, why? And she was like, I've always thought of you as this sweet person. And I was like, wow, nobody's ever used the word sweet with me before. I was like, how nice of you.
Oh, well, I tell you, yeah.
I was not expecting that. And I was like, well, here we are,
Oh, I tell you, we always say the quiet ones are the ones you watch, but I don't know. I know a lot of firemen that, their ideal romantic novels would probably get us all in a load of trouble. My boss used to tell me that most of these things I came up with would automatically warrant a psych evaluation, each and every time, and so. But hey, that is neat though. I'm happy you're going that direction. I just, like I said, I don't know how many authors I've talked to, and they said, you can only do so many paranormal books, and you have have to branch out. And, when Richard told me that, I thought, wow, I never thought about that. And I long time ago, I taught bartending at one of the only local schools they had around here, bartending and bar flair. One guy says, you need to do a bartending book. And I thought, I wouldn't mind doing something like that.
That would work for you.
Yeah, after a couple of paranormal books, work into something like that, because I like doing that. In the old art of mixology, it's very hard to find people that really do that. I always tell people, when you go to restaurants, they're not bartenders. They're people that have a POS system that has the recipes in it, and they look it up and they do the best they can. If you really want to go somewhere with a mixologist, used to you go to TGI Fridays, but they don't even have them anymore. But if you go to Mike's Blue Martini, or you go to, some of the upper scale ocean area, yes, you're going to find some mixologists. But I mean, or certainly some other towns, New York, Chicago has plenty. But that is fantastic. Let's talk a minute about the Central State book and your research of Central State.
So Michael helped with the research about that a lot.
Yes.
You have to understand, that book came out, I think, in 2006 or 2008. I can't remember which. Maybe I'm a little off on that.
Yes.
Michael's going to go look it up. But anyway.
Okay.
When I started researching that book, it actually took me 10 years to do off and on, because I had other books that I was writing and trying to find some of the information. And this was before like newspapers.com came online and that kind of stuff. So I was running to like the state library, the Indiana Historical Society, the state archive.
Boy, it's so much nicer now, isn't it?
I just found out.
It's so much nicer now. You can do all that from a computer. I remember those days.
Anyway.
You still have to go to the state archives, but even some of the stuff that I was allowed to have access to, they don't allow anybody access to anymore.
Oh, wow.
I just found that out this weekend,
which
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have a database online where you could look up, like, if you had like a family member that you thought was in like a mental hospital or like a county home or something like that.
Yeah.
That you could look all of that up online, and they had a database, but it didn't have like the records. It just had their name and like their maybe their date of birth or something.
Yes.
And the location that they were at. And they took that offline because I was actually trying to find the hospital where Baumeister had been sent to.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, hey, I wasn't able to find this. And one of my contacts there, she was like, yeah, we took it offline. They've tightened up restrictions on mental health records even more. Yeah. I think they're really misinterpreting the law. But anyway.
Well, a lot of people will say HIPAA is, it's because of HIPAA. HIPAA only has to do with insurance. The 72 Privacy Act is what, gathers most patients' information. You can't release them. Now, if it becomes part of a insurance claim, then HIPAA has something to say about it. But a lot of people, and you're probably very right, a lot of people misinterpret the law and how it reads, and they misgovern that whole issue. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's true.
In Indiana, it's supposed to be 75 years, which is why I got to look at some of the stuff prior to 1930. But now that they've interpreted, the attorneys have interpreted it, don't even get me started on that. Michael did correct me. It was 2014 that the book came out. But anyway, so I had to go to the state archives, and it's like, well, what do I need to copy out of these yearly reports? And then I wanted to know who was buried there and all of that, and it wasn't very well taken care of at the time. And I think there is at least a semi decent the Indiana Medical History Museum has a listing of everybody.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
The listing out at the cemetery, but. There was so much stuff that's in there that I wanted more information about, and it was hard to find anything in the newspapers or anything like that.
No, they kept that stuff out there. They didn't want people to know it.
No, they didn't. And there were, it's the same story at any, because people are like, well, you should do one on this one or that one, in or out of Indiana. It's like, it's the same story. Really, it is. It was built for this purpose. There were not enough checks and balances. And I'm not saying everything that they did there was bad, but there were not enough checks and balances. They were, sold bad food. They found out about it in the 1870s, and then they were, sold that food back when they were, credited for it, and then they just bought it back again, And so there just wasn't enough checks and balances, and then there was patient right issues. And, we didn't get patient rights until like the 1960s. And in fact, one of the ladies that actually caused the closing of the hospital, she died because she was a known bedwetter. Her window was broken, and she basically froze to death in her pee.
Oh, God. Yeah, I know when I read your book, it was shocking.
She did. She was one of them that forced the closing because nobody had taken care of the window. Somebody had stuffed a blanket in there, and she froze to death in her own pee.
Yeah.
And people talk about, one thing that really bothers me about Central State is people are like, well, they performed all of these lobotomies and stuff on people. Well,
no.
yes and no. First of all, when you're talking about early mental health, they didn't know what was going to work and what was not going to work. And it's just like, it's the same thing today with clinical trials. We don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. It's a little bit more controlled these days. But so they were just like using things and trying to make it stick, and
throw it on the wall and see what sticks.
They're like, well, they did electric shock therapy. They certainly did. And guess what? They still do it today.
Oh, yeah.
Again, different version, but they still do it,
yes.
And so
they call it more humane, but it's the same thing.
I talked with one of the doctors that used to be out there because he read my book. It was, he had it, and Dr. Stern was his name. And he had a little book club with some of the doctors that used to work out there. And they said that they loved my book, which was one of the biggest compliments because I'm not a medical professional.
Yeah.
I don't pretend to be one. And I really had to look up a bunch of stuff because I'm like, I don't even know that this is right. So I had to look stuff up. And the only thing that they were concerned about is that I did not use in-text citation. And I said I did that on purpose. And
I hate that. I really do.
I was like, I wanted people to read it and not have an interruption of, all of this stuff. So it was really hard to find information about the hospital other than what was in their yearly reports, which didn't give enough information. And then, like I said, when you got into the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then of course in the 80s and 90s when it was all going amok, you were able to find a lot more. But, one other thing that bothers me is when people say, well, they just threw them all out on the street. They did not throw them on the street. What happened was they did a 10-year study on the people that were the only ones left. They exited the people out that they could have in their exit home and put them into group homes or put them into other places. And what happens when somebody has been institutionalized? They want to go back to where they know. And so they ended up on the street because they couldn't go back to the hospital. And there was not and I'm not saying that it wasn't sad, and I'm not saying that they didn't deserve more help, but there weren't any more deaths in the population that was left that they did the study on than any other group of people.
And don't take this statement wrong, but there was other homes far worse than this one.
Yeah, and now the community, everybody was like, well, they should have closed it. No, they shouldn't have. And it's like, well, the community health centers are now overburdened and have been since the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're going through some of the same things there.
You are. I mean, years ago when they closed it, we transported patients down to what is now the IUPUI campus, and that was where the mental health. And this is going to sound horrible. It's terribly unprofessional, but within what we call graveyard humor, we called it Disneyland East. You were going to take the Twinkie Mobile down to Disneyland East because you picked these people up, and most of the people we picked up, there was one patient many years ago that we had to run out on, and the lady had became rather fascinated with a TV evangelist, and she was a model, and she kept disrobing herself. She had nothing on but a bathrobe that we ended up taping on to get her to leave it shut. And she kept using this phrase, have sex with me, piss on me in the name of the Lord. And we had to transport her from Cumberland all the way downtown to the IU mental health ward. And that was a challenge, and we ended up having put it, normally you had a driver and a medic on a rig, which it was either EMT or paramedic. And we had to have three because it took two people to constantly keep her robe closed. And I'll never forget it because we get her down there and we get her in the ambulance bay. And we didn't have duct tape. I mean, we had bandage tape. That's what we were using. So we roll in and the guy, and I won't say his name, but he was the orderly we dealt with down there, and he kept right out and says, what do you got? She jerks that robe open and makes her monologue. And I looked at him, I said, I tell you what we got, it's now yours. I said, lots of luck. And but we would bring them in, and I mean, and I talked to a lot of the guys when we transported Central State. It was much more professional. We could bring somebody like this into a back bay, get her covered up, get her in to a point where and get her restrained where this was not an issue, where tons of people were seeing it and everything else. It was a lot better handled. They didn't like the fact that it closed, and they weren't happy with it,
There were two shocking things that came out of that. I mean, a lot of it I expected.
Yes.
But two shocking things that came out of the research that I did for that book. I mean, I did get a couple ghost stories, but that was completely unintentional.
Yes.
Was first of all that Eli Lilly did drug tests on the men, at least the men there in the cottages, and I did more research after I wrote the book, and that was not an uncommon thing. In fact, there's a couple of places, a couple of state hospitals in Illinois that I found out through the Encyclopedia of Haunted Illinois that they did that too as well. And then when patient rights came out, they stopped doing that. And again, going back to the lady who died in her own pee, her family found out, and this is like in 92, 93, around in that area.
Yes.
They found out that she had an abortion.
Yes.
Because one of the other patients had gotten her pregnant, and the doctors made the decision: what kind of life would this child have? I don't care where you sit on the abortion thing, but to do that without the family's knowledge, that was just horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, they should have had a say so in that. And then the other thing that kind of shocked me, there was that part, and then the other one I'm having a very hard time with. Oh, the prostitution, yes. That there was a Skip Hess. I will never forget that man.
Skip Hess.
He was a journalist for the Indy. Was it the Indy Star or the Indy?
Okay, the name sounds familiar. That makes sense. Okay.
And he had been in the military, and I had found a lot of his investigative reporting on the hospital. And I found him because I wanted to talk to him, because he went undercover with all the rats and all of that kind of stuff that was going on in there, how horribly infested it was and how slovenly it was and all that kind of stuff. But he told me about how there were people that were employed at the hospital.
Yes.
And I won't tell you who. He did mention some names, and I wouldn't write them for purposes of legal legalities.
Sure.
That would, if there are some people who have mental issues that get hypersexual, as you kind of said, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they would enable that by taking them out to Washington Street, just to the southern edge of the property, and having people pick them up and go have sex with them and bring them back.
No kidding.
And he said that was one thing that he had, above and beyond the slovenliness and all that he had uncovered.
Yes.
And he was threatened with a lot of things if he were to print that. So that the story, the investigation that he did was great, but it was only half the story.
Yeah.
So it was.
Man.
I was just absolutely shocked.
Yeah.
That this was. And do I think that it goes on today? Pretty sure it does.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things that go on today.
And that's the sad part. What have we gained?
Well, I think for everything we gain, we take two steps back. I think that's just in any science.
And I don't want to say that everybody that worked at Central State was bad, or that everybody in the community health care system is bad. They're understaffed, over patiented. There's not enough checks and balances. There's never enough money, and it's broken, and it needs to.
It's a very broken system. Well, and I'll tell you, if you look back at like Allegheny and Pennhurst, I was Googling fast while you were talking. There's another, it's in New York, and I can't think of the name of it. They've had several specials on it. And,
It's not the Richardson, is it?
Nope, it's not that one. I was trying to remember, but that is one I know of. I hadn't thought of that one. Part of the problem is being in healthcare at one point, and even as a medic, it's not the same kind of healthcare as clinical. But still, there are patients that, no matter what you do, you have to take, if a patient is violent or self-destructive, you have to put them in patient restraints. There's no good way about it. You got one of two ways you're going to handle it. You're either going to sedate them to the point they're lethargic and they sit there like a knick-knack on a shelf, or you're going to have to restrain them. And people will look at these leather restraints, and they do look a little archaic, ones we used to use. And I mean, but they were there for a reason. People couldn't chew through them. They were very thick leather, made out of saddle leather. And I mean, we had them on the ambulances. And, and like you were saying about some of the novels, I mean, some of our guys in the fire department used to steal them for, home play. And we had to watch them on that stuff. Those things weren't cheap.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no, they used to. I remember one of my guys, he was one of these kind of creepy guys. We watched this show, Rookie, occasionally, and there's a guy on there named Smitty. It always reminds me of that. And we're on a scene with about 8 police officers, and he looks at the female police officer and says, "Do you have any spare cuffs you want to sell?" If I could have got to him quick enough, I'd have beat the crap out of him. He worked for me, and I thought, why in the world would you ask that? And we're not, it's not, yeah, and we're on a scene, we're not out in, we're not in the firehouse having dinner. I mean, with a couple cops that stopped. Oh, no, we're out in the public. And he wants to ask her if she has any handcuffs for sale. But anyway, a lot of the stuff, how we handled those patients were somewhat arcane, and it couldn't be helped. It was the only technology we had at the time. It was like you were talking about different procedures. They were trying to throw it on the wall and see what stuck. Electrical shock therapy, ice therapy, and frontal lobotomies were not as prevalent as most people thought. And
at Central State, I just want to make this very clear. The majority of the lobotomies that were done at Central State were patients that actually came from Methodist Hospital.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that a bit. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
And there were not that many of the, and I don't mean to negate the fact that lobotomies had a 33% success rate.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened for some people, but they did not. They sent them to Central State to get the lobotomy done. It wasn't like they were doing it on their patients there.
Yeah.
Generally, they didn't do that. The one that was more prevalent in doing them in Indiana was Logansport.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, and I'll one day I'll text you and I'll remember the name of this asylum. They actually had a special, and I can't remember. It seems like it started with a P, and I can't remember. And I've looked through 4 or 5 sites, and no one listed. But it wasn't Pennhurst. I remember Pennhurst, but this was another one, and it was. They talked about different things that happen. Every asylum has some problems. I mean, that happens in hospitals too. There are deaths of clinical people that, as far as healthcare providers, that happen. And it very well. And hang on just a minute. Nope, that one isn't it either, but it's close. Sierra Found Pilgrim.
Was it the one in New Jersey?
Yes. New Jersey, that's where it was at. It wasn't New Jersey, New Jersey. And it had a really unique
Not that
name.
I remember the name, just the place.
Yeah, but the pictures were, of course, that's a lot of what tells the story in a lot of the newspapers. But the problem you get into with these facilities were, you had corruption. You have that in hospitals today. I'm sorry to say that. I sit on a board for a major hospital. It's a patient advocate board, and I'm not going to get into that because I'm sure my lawyer is going, "Oh, Jesus." Every time he hears one of my podcasts. So, yeah, and he goes, "Why didn't you edit that out?" I can see that coming now, But anyway, the problem you get into with a lot of this is there's always, that's human nature. With human nature comes corruption, comes shortcuts, ways that when you get a budget, and I've been there as a fire chief having to deal with budgets, and you got to make it fit. You have to, I always told my guys, remember when you're driving the apparatus, you're driving a piece of equipment that the lowest possible bidder won the contract for. Keep that in mind when you're braking. And, but I mean, truthfully, you have to make cuts. And, it's not right, but I see it happen. And this one had a big expose. I remember it was like an hour-long special I'd watched. And I don't know how, I didn't write, because it had nothing to do with paranormal. I ran across it by accident. I don't remember. I think Heather may have been sick that day, and I was watching it in my office, and I thought, it was like watching a train wreck. I couldn't turn the channel. And I ended up watching the whole program. But anyway, a lot of those, though, when the few bad things come out, there's a lot of false accusations and informations that follow, because it makes it more press ready, and you see a lot of allegations being performed. I mean, I remember tons of things that came out about Central State. When we roll in with an ambulance, it would come in through the main gate. We'd be checked in, taken over to intake, which was not far from the admin building. And the first time I really got to get into there was during a paranormal investigation after the closure, many years after the closure. And I was working with a defunct group years ago called IPI. And so one of the things I wanted to tell you about, because a lot of people don't know this, and I can't remember the governor, but years ago, Indianapolis, I'm going to divert here, so stay with me on this, but we didn't have the zoo. Okay, the zoo didn't exist, and the only zoo they had was at the Indianapolis State Fairgrounds. And it's still there to this day. It's behind the DNR building, although it doesn't have very many animals in it. But back then, it was quite well maintained. DNR maintained it. Well, and this came up with the budget cuts came to mind in my mind. So anyway, all these animals cost the state money. At some point, the zoo was being the old zoo, which is when I was at when I was a kid. It was formed, and they were building it and adding on to it, and this zoo was no longer being visited. So the governor decided we need to get rid of these animals because they're costing us. So he tried to get them out to that zoo and other zoos, and nobody would take them. He had them taxidermy. Now, this is the governor that has the statue in front of the State House. I'm trying to think of his name. It's not coming to me. But anyway, he has all the bad thing was one of the creatures, one of the animals he had taxidermy was the last Indiana black bear.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. So, needless to say, the reporters find out, and the headline reads, Governor has extinct animals taxidermied for viewing. I'm thinking, this is a PIO officer's nightmare. And, so what do they do with all the stuffed animals? Because he's got to get rid of them now. He's got all these taxidermied animals. And not all of them were, the only one I know of that was extinct was the black bear. They get taken to the basement of Central State Hospital, main annex, and they're stored in the basement. Fast forward, we're doing an investigation. As far as I know, it was authorized. Okay, I never participated in an unauthorized abandoned building exploration, not intentionally anyway. There was a couple times in Chicago, I think I got into a building I wasn't supposed to be into, but I had no idea I was there. So here's all these poor people trying to recover. Here's all these taxidermy animals that are now in the basement. So we're doing this investigation, and they didn't move the animals out yet. And we get down there, and I swear to God, there's only a few times in all my years of investigating I've had one of those, oh, Jesus moments. And when you realize you're shining light on a 7-foot or 10-foot reared-up bear that's baring teeth, that's one of those moments in life you question your whole reason for investigating. You hope you have a spare set of pants, and you hope you can run faster than the guy behind you. And, so after all this happens, I'm thinking, why the hell are all these things in a basement? So I actually got to talk to a guy who worked with the grounds maintenance there. And he was with my Masonic Lodge. He said, well, I'll tell you. He says, I can tell you exactly where those came from. So he told me this whole story, and I thought, no. So I looked up on newspapers.com. Yeah, it's actually on there. There is headlines. This guy, this governor had them all taxidermied. And so the last known American or Indiana black bear is still in existence. It's just not near as active. And, I think
it doesn't move much anymore.
I think the Indiana State Museum has it. I think is where it ended up at, because once they found out all those were down there, it kind of brought it back to light, and the city made sure they got them the hell out of there. They sent trucks over, because he told me after we had been through there, they realized they were still there, and somehow or another during the night, they got them all out of there. And but that, I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but I thought I would present that to you, because that's something that I heard I thought was so funny when I heard it.
I haven't, but I when I wrote my book, I went through every tunnel, every basement, every building, and it was legal. Mm-hmm. I went with a cop. He had to break into some of the buildings because they hadn't given him the right keys. It was fun. Had to climb in windows. I was like, how bad do I want these pictures?
Yeah.
But no, we went into every building, and I can say with some certainty, because I think I would have shit myself, to be honest.
Yeah. I about did.
I did not see any taxidermied anything. I saw a few dead bats and birds and a lot of mold. But nothing like that. Asbestos, but not that.
True story. I went with a police officer on another building, and he was helping me in the same way. And I remember we couldn't get in a couple places. I said, "Are you having any luck?" And he turns around. He says, "You know what we do in the police department when we have this situation?" I go, "What?" He says, "We call the fire department." I'm going, asshole. And it's not like I brought my Halligan and my axe with me, dude. I'm a chief. I don't do that kind of work anymore. And but he was quite the comedian. And every time we get somewhere, he goes, "Well, maybe we ought to call an engine off station." No. But when you said that, that reminded me.
When I wrote my book, if I had known, so the cop that I went through with, by the time I got the book done, and actually 2006 is when I went through the building. So I guess it didn't take me quite 10 years. It was 8. But anyway, I gave him a copy of the book. By this time, he'd retired and he moved out west and all of this. And I said, he said, "Well, if you would have backed a U-Haul up, I would have let you take everything out of there." And I said, "You damn fool. Why didn't you tell me to go get a U-Haul?"
Why didn't you say that at the time?
Yeah.
Mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, because, now, I'm
sure.
sure.
Things out of there.
Oh, yeah.
I actually talking about furniture and stuff with tags on it and all sorts. And dude. You gotta be more clear with me next time.
Well, yeah. When I was in the medical museum, I talked to the curator they had at the time, and I asked him where he got some of the stuff at. And he says, "Well, it's over in the annex, 70s annex." And I said, "Well, they give it to you?" He says, "No, I just walked over there during lunch and picked it up and brought it back." He said, "I just did it last week." He said, "You want to go get some?"
I have pictures. I have pictures that patients had made. I've got a vase. I actually have video that I don't know why somebody didn't pick it up, but I've got 2 sets of video that were recorded there.
Wow.
Old 8mm video that I got digitized.
Wow.
Yeah, I was I've got an old pair of nurses' shoes, the really old ones.
Yeah, the white ones. Yeah.
20s. No, the ones from the 1920s that have the wooden heels on them.
Oh, yeah.
I have a nightstand that was given to me by somebody else that got it from some other chain of command that I don't know and I don't want to know.
Exactly. Yeah, been there.
So it's all I know is that it came from there, and they had 2 and they gave me 1. So we did a little bit of bartering there. So,
well, there was one I tried to get because I wanted something from there, and I remember there was a glass, because back years and years ago, all the syringes we used were glass, and they were, they were sterilized and reused, and he didn't have the needle for it, but he had the original glass syringe. It came, one of them of many millions that came out of Central State, but there was no way to tell for sure it was with Central State, but he told me that it came out of Central State, and I always thought that would be neat to have to put on my bookshelf. I've got a piece of concrete I brought back from Ground Zero, and I've got a few things up and down that, most of it's paranormal. There's a couple that aren't, but the majority is. And, I was really surprised when this curator told me, so you can go over there and, but now the police were really good about keeping people out. And this was back because my rescue squad at the time was trying to get the old Station 18 on the corner before they tore it down and all that got moved around. It ended up being the city got it, and then they gave it to Parks and Recreation. They gave it to city streets and something for using for a paint booth until the first time they brought a vehicle in there and just the doors were too narrow. That's the reason they moved to the new fire station. Those doors were so narrow they would actually, there's only a couple pieces of apparatus they could keep in there because none of the other stuff would fit. It was too wide. And there was a notorious record of guys tearing up equipment, getting it in or out of the bays. Well, the first vehicle they went to go paint, they barked it in and took half the building off, bigging it in because they were off center. And so, but I remember when they discovered the graves, and the mayor at that time was not politically aligned with me, and we didn't like each other very much at all. And, at the time, they didn't know where any of the graves were at. And of course, they had the book over at the museum, and they were looking at it at the time. And I remember at the time it was IPD, it wasn't Metro, but IPD wanted, their SOC team wanted in there. Well, they kind of did themselves in because they decided to use flashbang grenades at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning. It turns out the neighbors didn't find that amusing. And a bunch of the older citizens in the area Yeah, a couple of calls to the mayor, and those boys had to go out to the state fairgrounds. And, that was the end of that. And I remember of course, they moved the stables there, and but I remember different things came up, and we were laughing the other day because now they've turned this into condos and things. And I said, I'm waiting for the phone calls to start. So
they have. We've had a lot of people call us, and in fact, one of the I don't know if she's still there or not, but the steeplechase. What was it? Steeplechase?
Yes.
The person that took care of the office manager there, whatever her title was, she messaged us and said, "Hey," and I was like, "Well, duh," and well, I didn't say it like that, but I was just like. Do you want us to come over and talk with any of the people there, any of the people in the condos next door, any of the people in any of the other places? Because I can tell you exactly what's going on with them, Yeah. And I don't mean to sound narcissistic about it, but it's like, what did you guys think? I mean, the admin building, or what everybody called the admin building.
Yes.
Chock full. And in fact, this is a funny story, you talking about the police and everything.
Yes.
I go out there every now and then to take pictures because I still photo document everything.
Sure. Yes.
And I've been to an event at the 1891 building or 1892, whatever it's called.
Yes.
It used to be the old dining room and rec hall for the guys, and haunted. But there was one time I was taking pictures through the window because I don't break into places, and there was a cop that showed up, and Michael's sitting in the car with, I think, one of our friends, and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm just taking pictures, and I had one of my books with me just for this purpose.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I come out here and photo document. I'm not trying to break in.
Yeah.
I'm just very curious about all of this. And I showed him the book. And then he proceeds to tell me, I don't know if you've heard this or not. There was a group. And when I say group, I don't know that it was a paranormal group or if it was just a con group, an event group or whatever. But they had sold years ago. They had sold tickets. So this must have been like maybe 6 years ago.
Yes.
They sold tickets to 300 people to do an investigation at Central State.
Yep, that's true. It happened.
Yeah, it did. And he was saying how he got called out there because there were these people en masse with these like little bracelets on saying that they had paid for this experience.
Yeah.
They hired somebody local to take care of the event. And all of these people got conned out of their money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. It was in the news. It was very big. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God. I was like, no, dude, that's not my gig.
Yeah.
I'm just out here taking pictures and I'm short.
I just write books.
I had to raise my camera up and put it against the glass because I'm short, and I couldn't believe that. But he was really cool about it. I was like, look, guy, I'm just
well,
here taking
they
pictures.
Get a lot of those calls. I mean, they do. And if you're honest, most of the time, when I was writing my first book, I had to do one of the chapters was on the electric bridge in Shelbyville, and I knew the sheriff out there. Because I was not only in the firemen's club in the Shrine, I was in the police club. So I didn't do a lot with the police, but I knew them. And the gentleman skipper, he was the sheriff out there. He's retired since. And I'll never forget this. I loved this because I went out there and it's starting to rain a little bit. And I'm out there doing pictures and up comes a cruiser. Now, I wasn't in a marked car, obviously. I'm in my own vehicle. And the guy gets out, walks up, and same kind of thing. Hey, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to decide, because the truth is probably not going to be as good a story as what I can make up. I said, but I'm out here writing a book on paranormal entities within the county of Shelby. And I said, I'm out here on the electrical bridge. He says, yeah, I'd have went with fishing or something like that. And I go, yeah, thanks. And he says, I need to see some ID. So I said, if you check with your sheriff skipper, he will tell you that he knows I'm out here. And he goes, okay. So he goes back to the car for a few minutes, comes back, hands me my ID, and he says, yeah. He says, son of a bitch. He says, you're right. He says, that's what Skipper told me. He says, you're out here. He says, I didn't think people actually did that. I said, yeah, we do. And, he goes, can I help? I go, I can't think of any way how. I go, other than maybe just keeping me from getting hit by any cars until I get done here.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so, for a long time, every once in a while, I still get someone on a police force, I won't say which ones, that'll call me and go, you got a minute? Well, that usually means they've got a problem. Matter of fact, the one thing we always tell was that, we've had an 800 hotline for a very long time. And one of the cases that comes to mind is the Gary Demon House, the one that a certain individual we're not going to get into. But yeah,
right.
Yeah. And the night that happened, when LaToya had her first, there was more than one police department there. And we got a call from a young deputy that was shook up. And he called. Of course, I had no idea this is where this case is going. So he calls us on the 800. I was the one who answered the phone. And I'm talking to him. He's describing this. I'm saying, well, if this is accurate, what you're describing to me, it's more of a demonic situation. And I'm whirling through this way. We had no idea where this would end up. I mean, and obviously it became part of the, we found out it was the Gary Demon House he was on. And he told me, he said, I can't give you my name because I'm not authorized to make this phone call. It's an active case and we're not allowed to discuss it. But it kind of reminded me of that part in Ghostbusters where Ernie goes, this shit would turn you white. I mean, that was kind of the impression I got with this poor guy. He was scared shitless. And the 800 line is a load of fun because it's like a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get. One night we had I never will forget it, we had a lady call me up and it was like going on midnight and she calls me up and says, well, I've got this problem. I've got this UFO. It came over and dropped off these ghosts. I'm thinking, shit, it's midnight and I really want to get in bed. I told her, I said, well, look, let me give you the number of MUFON because since the UFO brought it, you should probably start there. She goes, they're the ones that gave me your number. I thought, those fucking assholes. And, obviously they didn't want to deal with her at midnight either. We had another guy call. We were getting ready to leave, me and the wife, and he goes, I want to hunt Bigfoot. And I said, well, we don't do cryptozoology. I mean, let me get you a hold of Mike down at the BFRO in Bloomington. I said, that's the guy you want to talk to. I said, we don't do that kind of work. He said, well, just ask me. He says, where can you buy tags at? And I'm thinking, tags? What tags? What do you mean tags? He says, tags and stamps for hunting them. Oh, I said, well, let me give you DNR's number. Call those guys. I thought, well, there's more people who are not on the Christmas card list with. Yeah, because I sent them over there because I was looking to get rid of them. But yeah, the number can be and we've helped a lot of people through it, but it can also get some I had a guy who was going to, call me one time. It was a salesman, and he goes, what does this line go to? I said, we hunt ghosts. And the guy says, no, really? Oh my God, it was hilarious. And then after we established what we do on the line, he goes, well, hey, anyway, who has your cell service for your group? I'll give him this. I'll give him this. This guy was a great salesman. Someone should hire him. I mean, he was
on it.
Yeah, he was on it. But,
make that sale.
I always have to laugh. But, yeah, I mean, and the thing is, a lot of these places, I know Avon Bridge. That's one that they shoo you away pretty regularly. And if you go through the channels, you do it legally, they'll let you be there for periods of time. I mean, they'll even unlock and let you go between the different cavities.
We used to work with them at the park, and then the lady that we worked with, she left. We would do it, and we would investigate both bridges, and we would take a group of people to one bridge, a group of people to the other, and we did it for them for their parks department.
Well, yeah. Well, I here lately I've been doing a lot with the library. Now I don't do much with the Indiana Public Library anymore. The gal that originally hired me had me doing lectures all over the place, and then she left. And I was told very promptly by a gentleman internally replacing her just temporarily that he wasn't going to do this program any longer. I got the impression he didn't really believe in ghosts, but anyway, I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but I just got that vibe. And then
but there's a vibe going on with any kind of controversial thing within the libraries right now.
Exactly. So, and they got a new gal, and I talked to the Decatur Township Library branch manager, and she says, you really need to send the program back to her and let her look at it, and because they were scheduling me at the time. And I said, okay. So I sent one out, but I haven't heard anything. I think you're right. I think there's a lot going on there from what there was. So, but
this goes up and down with the libraries for us too. Sometimes you have a lot. Sometimes you have to.
You know what? Though? I want to go back to what you said about getting some weird folks on your 800 number.
Sure.
I think the weirdest thing that ever happened to us was that there was this woman that contacted us, and we don't have an 800 number. They either call a regular number or they send us an email.
Yes.
And we make them fill out a very long questionnaire.
Yeah, so do we.
And this woman, I mean, she kind of hit everything okay. So we contacted her, and she said that she found some weird shit in her attic. And it's like, okay, fine, And so when we got there, and then she said that there were some things going on, and her child was actually kind of scared of something in its bedroom. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went there, and the weird shit in her attic was a book in Hebrew that she had turned into a Ouija board.
Oh, God.
And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with Ouija boards. I look at Ouija boards as just another communication tool to speak with the dead, and you just have to use it right. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
But she turned that into a Ouija board, and it's like it was a primer to learn Hebrew. And then, and then she had some like and the house had stood empty for a little while before the current owner that she rented from had gotten it.
Yes.
I looked it up online, and it was built in the 1920s. I found the family; they were Jewish. The books were probably left over from them.
Yeah.
And then there were candles that were up there that were white candles, which there's probably some voodoo crap going on with her. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I really shouldn't say voodoo crap, but there was probably some crap going on, because then she got weird. So then she was like, well, my child is, there's something creepy in the basement. And I did get weirded out, but I didn't see anything, didn't feel anything. And then she's like, well, my child, sees this thing over in the corner. She had a really good story. And then, the child was there, but had no problem going into that room.
Sure.
Okay,
and that wouldn't be the case if it was paranormal.
So I was like, okay, let's shut off all the lights. Kids still had no problem going into that room.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, there's something jacked up here.
Well,
so then she proceeded to tell me that her ex-husband, she had his ashes, and that he was like a bastard. And and that, I was like, okay, so why do you have his ashes?
Yeah, why would you keep those?
For my child. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And she goes, well, I got a tattoo and put some of his ashes into that. And I was like,
okay,
Angie,
now there you go.
And I was like, and you wonder why you're having some issues. Not that I think it's wrong to do that, but I'm just like, really, to that person?
Yeah, I'm not going to find the guy that I hate the worst, and have his name tattooed on me. Yeah,
We told her, it's like, look, these are the things that you need to do, because this is the way that we approach legal
under my skin.
If you're having problems, you need to take responsibility for your house. Okay, it's not my house, so you need to be a part of this. And she refused to do some of the things. And then she's like, I really think there's a demon in here, so I know somebody who takes care of that. And I kind of did that passing on thing.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do they call you and go, I've got a demon in my house? I mean, I don't think the devil does that much marketing.
I need help. She's like, I need help. I need help. I was like, but you need to do these things before
help
we
me
can
help you.
Do this.
Yeah.
So then she stopped calling, because I'm just like, girl, no, I'm just not. We're not. So
and I tell you, when you have a phone number, it's listed, and this is, we don't really have an 800, but it's a regular number, but, people can dial it. We always say it's manned 24 hours. It is. We have an answering machine. We don't always have people on it, but it's a Google number, and it rotates through numbers till if no one answers, it goes to the voicemail. And we get people that will call. Matter of fact, I got one lady, and this goes, my retired co-founder always had this saying that no good deed goes unpunished. And this one woman, she's in a nursing home. It's on the west side, near Avon, and she's a very sweet lady. I try not to be an ass about most things. I always told everybody in the fire department, yes, I was an asshole, I was a professional asshole, but I was the most lovable asshole you'd ever meet. And I always joked about it. But this poor lady calls me, and she's pretty sure she's haunted by a ghost in a room in the nursing home. And I explained to her that the facility is not going to let us drag equipment in there. So 67 calls later, because she called on average 3 times a day.
Every day.
Yeah, my wife refers to her as my girlfriend. And so finally I called the facility and I go, look, we have a problem, you see. If I can come out there with a millimeter, and I don't care if it's a TV remote control, and I can sit in the room for a few minutes and convince her we got this worked out, can I do that so I get a little peace and quiet? Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't have, because if it got spread around that you have ghosts, I said, It's an 80-year-old woman. I'm quite sure she's mentioned it to a few of your other residencies. Yeah, I mean, your residents know that she thinks the place is haunted. And, I couldn't, and I finally had to tell the lady, I said, look, and it took like 12 times telling her before it sunk in. I said, I can't do it. They're not going to let me. And I think about 6 months ago, we got one call from her. Hadn't heard from her in about a year. We had one call. Matter of fact, I told Heather when she mentioned it, I said, oh, God, don't jinx us. And sure as shit, the next week, this woman calls. But I said, well, at least she isn't dead. I mean, she's still living and she's still, but, we get a myriad of calls. And, a lot of them always start out with, I have a demon. How the hell did you come up with that? Were you watching were you watching one of the other stations shows when that came through? I mean, and they'll say, well, the ghost is haunting my house. It's a demon. Well, again, how did you come up with that? Well, it's haunting my house. Well, that doesn't make it a demon. I got 3 ex-wives. They haunted houses for years. That didn't make it. I thought they were demons, but they apparently weren't. And, we get all that. And, I mean, if you step into this field, you got to expect a few interesting calls. Now, some of them have been entertaining. I've had a little boy call me. It was probably 10 or 12, and he was fun to talk to. And, I think he was lonely and by himself, and after he found out we hunt ghosts, and he wanted me to tell him a ghost story. And, being a grandfather, I went ahead and told him a short ghost story I made up quickly. And, but we've had a lot of fun things and some things not so fun. And, but, still to this day, I get a few phone calls and from some of the police officers, and they'll go, I need you to look at something. And I remember one time I got called out to, and he probably listens to this, I don't want to piss him off, but he was good about it. He called me and he says, I think we got someone practicing Santorini. I go, how is that? He says, I think there's an altar. So they call me out there. I drive out, and there's a dead bird in front of a vacant retail store, and there's some sticks laying down there. And I looked at him. He says, you think this is an altar? I go, no, I think it's a dead blackbird. That's what I think. And I go, it hit the glass and it died. He says, what about the sticks? I said, maybe it was carrying them to a nest. I don't know. I said, I'm not a zoologist. I said, but I'll tell you one thing from the paranormal end, I don't think it's an altar. I said, I don't see a headless chicken. I don't see blood, and I don't think anybody in candles. I think you're good. And
or it fell out of a nest or something.
Yeah. Yeah. We every once in a while we get those. The other fun ones we get are the videos they send in. A lot of people buy these cheap home cameras, Blink, Black Owl, all these ones, and we had one lady call and say, I've seen this angel. The angel turned out to be a robin that was caught in still frame. It was beautiful. It did look like an angel until you focused it up, and it turned out it was on the porch. It was through a doorbell cam, and it had a nest over in one corner, so it would fly back and forth rather regularly. And she was collecting these, and while I was trying to isolate and focus the one, she'd sent me like 5 others. And I said, well, how often does this happen? And she goes, about 3 times a day. I said, you live in a church? And she goes, no. I go, okay, so we get those from time to time. And, but I always tell people, yeah, okay, we get 100 calls. 8 or 10 of them are good calls that we can actually help people on. And it makes a difference. We also had an instance, I'll tell you this real quick. We'll get back on subject, but we had an instance where a fellow veteran, his medication was mixed up, and he called me about some vampire ghosts. And we worked with him and finally got to the ability to get a hold of his daughter and explain to her what we thought was happening. They took him back down to VA. Sure enough, some of these meds were colliding, and it was actually going to become a dangerous situation soon. They got it corrected. Needless to say, the vampire ghost went away. But he was very appreciative, and so sometimes it isn't always about ghosts, as so.
Yeah.
But, well, folks, Michael, I know you didn't really get to talk too much and about some of the books. Do you have something you would like to add?
Well, we talked about the books quite a bit. We talked about Central State more. We haven't mentioned our ghost walks much yet. We do those, of course, in Indianapolis, in Noblesville, Westfield, in Anderson, where Nicole is from, where we just do the usual kind of outside ghost walking tour where we talk about history and the ghosts and the true crime. Sometimes go inside. Depending on the tour.
Sometimes on the tours we can go in a building, but we're fully dependent on the schedules of the buildings that we go into. On a couple of our walks, we get to go into cemetery. We go onto the grounds of an old cemetery that's no longer there on one of our tours.
That wouldn't be Green Lawn, would it?
No.
Okay.
No, we used to take our bus. We used to do bus tours, and we used to take people out to Central State before it got dark, because they said it's okay as long as you get out before it's dark.
Yeah.
We were fine with that. And then we used to take them back to Green Lawn, where Green Lawn used to be next to the Diamond Chain, and told stories back there.
And saw some things.
And we've seen some things.
Oh, yeah, that's active as everything.
Huh?
That's active as everything. I taught CPR. A buddy of mine at Diamond Chain was the safety director, and called me one day and said, would you like to teach CPR? And I said, no, not really. He says, we have ghosts. I said, okay, how many shifts did you want me to teach? And, so I show up, and the worst one was midnight, because I taught on a third floor that was vacant. They were clearing it out. It was the office portion, not the manufacturing portion. And he told me about this elevator that kept coming up and down. Well, I was down the corridor and around the corner. I could hear the elevator, but where I was set up, I had 4 or 5 mannequins out. And I taught from midnight till 7 a.m. And I wasn't used to working that shift anyway. I'm normally sleeping unless I'm on something. And so, on a run. And so after I said that, I realized that was a bad phraseology. But yeah, unless I'm on a run or something like that, wasn't like I was having a bad trip. But anyway, so I kept hearing the door open and close. I thought, shit, there's a lot of people in this building, considering there's hardly, because there was a big space where they took out all the partitions and desks. So the next morning I asked Jeff was the guy's name. I said, where does people work up here at that time of night? He goes, there is no people work up here, he says, other than you. I said, well, I've heard the elevator come down. So that's the ghost. He said, they ride that like a roller coaster at Kings Island. And I go, you're kidding. He says, no. He says, you ought to go down there and check it. And, of course, he took me to the cafeteria, showed me the several coffins that came up. And we did an episode of Ghost to Ghost on that. And my producer at the time, Jennifer, who is still a producer on here, she had a fit, because the first thing she says is, you don't get along good with this mayor and you want to do a follow-up episode? I go, oh, yeah, I want to do a Howard Stern on this thing. Because, now they got anthropology out there, and this whole thing is now coming to light, what happened. That these, it's true poltergeist graves didn't get moved, and now everybody's uptight about it. And, of course, they had to kill the India 11 thing and get it moved, because they didn't want this coming into vision, and I don't know what they're going to do. I was trying to get a hold of some of the anthropologists working out there, try to get them on the show, and we haven't had that opportunity yet, but we're working on it. But, Green Lawn was one of my favorite stories, and but if you ever get a chance to listen to our episode, and another one you would like, since you did Central State, was University Heights Hospital. I had a couple guys that, one of them used to be a fireman that worked for me, and then I had a cousin, and they all were attached with University Heights when it was vacated and made into Community South, and all the ghosts involved there. And there's some really good stories with that. So your candlelight walks now, when do you do these walks? I obviously, at night, but I mean, is it on the weekends or certain times?
Ghost walks
yes.
are, on the weekends, Friday, Saturdays mostly. We kind of switch the time as it gets darker later.
Okay.
So right now we start at 8, we start at 9 when it's in May, and kind of rotate through our different tours. And we do have one on July 3rd that we give every year.
Okay.
Because we had a mass sighting in the cemetery in Noblesville.
Okay.
Riverside Cemetery years ago, so we kind of like to spend some extra time there in the cemetery on July 3rd and check it out. So,
well, say if some of our listeners want to book a tour with you guys, how do they go about getting hold of you?
Yeah, our website has everything on there, unseenpress.com. You can get the books there. You can get our tour tickets there. Also, most of our investigation tickets you can get there, or you can find a link to the website of the organization that sells them, like the Athenium Foundation downtown, where the Rathskeller is. As well, they sell them on their site, but we link to them and we get them people who want to investigate. And get them all there, book your spots, and you get emails, and we put on our list, and we'll send you a waiver to sign.
Can they also get books there? Your books, both you and Nicole, can they get both of those through that same website?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can get it there. If you get them there, we can sign them if you're interested in that.
Yeah, if somebody wants a book and they want it signed to someone, they have to tell us that they want it signed and who they want it signed to. Otherwise, we don't sign the books because we don't know if somebody just wants a clean copy.
Well, and one thing I got to do is all the books I have, I don't think I have Michael's signature in them. I think I just have yours. So next time we see each other, I'll never forget one of the Paracons I went to. I had all the Jason and Grant books from TAPS. And each year I'd bring a few in. And Jason looked at me, he goes, how many did you buy? I go, all of them. And he looked at me, he says, just bring them down here, leave them, and I'll give them back to you later. And because, they were signing autographs and everything else, I'm trying to get the books signed. And so I make it a habit to make sure that, I get all my books signed up. But there's several more books I don't have. I just realized that some of your new ones coming out I'd like to get a hold of. So that works out. And you guys publish your own books, as I understand it, right?
We do. That was something that I had gone the traditional route with some books about English as a second language, and I made a pittance from that. And if anybody ever wants to know about self-publishing, I can totally give you a quick 5-minute rundown on that.
Wow.
But anyway, we do all of our marketing ourselves. I have a digital media degree, so I do all the printing and all of that stuff. And ISBN comes under our publishing house because that was something that I really, really wanted when I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, that it's going to be ours. It's not going to be somebody else's.
Well, that's all right. Well, I've got 2 more questions, and I tasked Heather and Sierra with coming up with a couple questions to ask. So who wants to go first?
Michael.
Do.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Michael, if you've got a question, send it to me.
No,
what you got?
Just throwing under the bus. Go ahead.
No, I mean, seriously, if you got something,
I was throwing him under the bus.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. I'm doing the same thing to the other 2, so,
I talked a lot.
Yeah, you talked a lot. Go ahead. What question you want to ask?
I was going to ask about the Haunted Night Scares coloring book. Is that anything like Scary Stories Tell in the Dark? It's got any of those in there? Oh.
I mean, it tells a scary story of, like if it's the Hook Man, it says, a young couple goes out, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, yeah.
So but it's very, very short.
The coloring is the main part.
Yeah, the coloring is the main part.
That's one story that, I remember when I was in high school, we taught backpacking, and a buddy of mine carried a broken off coat hanger piece for that story. He carried it everywhere in his backpack, that was the big thing, and I remember that distinctly. That story's been told a multitude of ways, but it's one of the best ones. I mean, short of maybe Bloody Mary, that's one of the best ones out there. Sierra, what is your question?
Okay, so mine is kind of unrelated to what we've been talking about.
Go for it.
As Chief mentioned, I am an investigator in training, and I just joined Spirit back a few months ago. So I was just curious if either of you had any advice you'd like to share on, being a beginner investigator. Any tips or advice?
You go first.
Definitely what we mentioned a little bit earlier, take your time and have patience and don't expect something every time. It's not happening that way, and I'm sure your folks already told you that. So that's kind of my thinking, patience.
And my advice is, in addition to what Michael said, because that's very good, is to keep your mind open. And even though you might want everything to be paranormal, make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that it really is, or that you can classify it as such, or if it's something that may be and needs more research, to be able to document that to go forward. That's very important.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it, and I can't thank you enough for being on the show tonight. I mean, it's been a great show. I hope you enjoyed it. I mean, we certainly have, and we got a lot of neat things. So I thought of 3 other things we could bring you back on for, just to have individual shows on. This has been a load of fun, and
yeah, we loved it. We'd love to come back. If you have some ideas or anything like that, we'd love to come back.
I tell you what we may do. We may get you and Michael back on to talk about maybe the Kentucky or Ohio Encyclopedia. We'll get you back on again in the very near future. So hopefully we'll get that done. So we're getting ready to sign off our program for tonight. And if you just hang on with me, folks, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on our Facebook page or Instagram. And that is it for tonight. All right, folks, it's that time again for the ghost story of the day. Today we have Sierra Medley, who will be doing our story.
Today's ghost story of the day is from the book Hoosier Folk Legends by Ronald L. Baker. The story is called The Klein Avenue Ghost. In 1954, a man killed his bride at Klein Avenue and Michigan Avenue and buried her in the woods near there. This was in a poor people's graveyard. In 1965, people started to see a lady dressed in white walk around the area. Well, many incidents followed that, such as a story about her disappearing in a cab and many others. Well, away one day, a lady walked into a store and got a bottle of milk and walked out without paying for it. The next day, the lady came into the store, got a bottle of milk, and walked out again without paying for it. The following day, the same lady came into the store and got a bottle of milk, but this time 3 men followed her from the store to the graveyard, where she disappeared from sight into a grave. The men dug up the grave and found the woman. She was dead, and next to her was a baby and 3 empty bottles of milk. The baby was alive.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd., all rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.